started. Before I start, just a bit of housekeeping. Members of the general public and councillors, if you do hear the fire alarm, please leave by the double doors, go down the stairs, go out the main building and congregate in the back corner of the car park. If any speaker wishes not to be recorded, because it is being streamed, please inform the committee clerk and he'll turn that bit off for you. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Item 1, apologies and substitutes.
Yes, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Purdy, Slack, Elliott, Gamble, and substituting is Councillors Froggatt and Statham.
Thank you very much. Item 2, approval of the minutes. They haven't been printed up yet, so they'll be done at the next full council meeting. So, item 3, interest. Any member declaring interest? Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, in interest of predetermination in 2 items, 21/01336 and 21/01513, when I have made comments on the website, as is every councillor's want as consultees. I will be leaving the room, so there is no problem with that. But I should just say I was only doing my best for my residents in my ward, visiting the sites and seeing the issues present.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzherbert. So anyway, moving swiftly on, I'm going to rejig the agenda slightly. So I'm going to start with item 5.6, which is the application number 22/01513, full 2-storey rear extension at Haywood Cottage, Haywood Farm, Buxton Road, Sandybrook, Ashbourne, Derbyshire. So anyway, I have no speakers on this. Oh, sorry, I do one. Sorry, it's my eyes. Mrs. Julie Palmer, the applicant, to speak in favour. You have 5 minutes if you'd like to come to the table, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left. It's okay.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to put forward my comments regarding the proposed extension to our house. Firstly, I would like to explain why this application was necessary. The original plans to convert the barn for residential use included 2 bedrooms only, one for ourselves and the other for my only child. We never planned to have another child, but life can sometimes be unpredictable, and I found myself dealing with an unplanned pregnancy at the age of 40. My eldest son is now 19 and Cody is now 6 years old. The age difference between the two is a major factor as to why they cannot share a room. As the house is only 1 room wide, splitting a room is not an option due to the low pitch of the roof, the position of the windows and the fact that we would have no room for wardrobes. The house, therefore, is now not fulfilling its role as a suitable family home. Now that the pandemic is over, Cody is now at an age where he is wanting to invite friends over after school. As is the nature of children, they love to show off their own space. As it currently stands, Cody is still having to sleep in our room, which is neither practical or ethical. He is not able to invite his friends over, as I fear that he would be ridiculed for still sleeping in the same room as myself. The nature of children can also be cruel. We have taken serious consideration as to how best to resolve this issue, which is now causing us immense stress. Our original plan was to extend the south gable. This we thought would be the easiest option. Following the refusal of the pre-app, mainly due to the external stone steps, and taking this view on board, we realised that the only other option was to extend outwards from the east-facing wall. This does not have any original features, as the wall was in a state of collapse at the time of the conversion and had to be completely demolished and rebuilt. The joint of the original brickwork is clearly visible. The house itself is situated within a family-owned farm, consisting of my sister-in-law in the main farmhouse and my mother-in-law in the adjoining barn conversion that is sited at a 90-degree angle to ourselves on the western elevation. Therefore, selling the property is also not an option. We plan to use reclaimed bricks so that it will sit inconspicuously along the original brickwork to the house. The ridge is to sit lower than the existing, and the south elevation will also be set in from the southern gable to help it remain subservient to the original dwelling and be left completely devoid of any features, so as not to deflect away from the original features of the stone steps. As mentioned in the statement of significance, the siting of the extension would have absolutely no impact in relation to the Grade 2 listed farmhouse or courtyard. Permission more recently has been granted for a 2-storey extension extending to the east of the 4-car garage, also sited in the same courtyard. This would run parallel to our own proposed plans. It has no impact on neighbouring properties due to the fact that it will be completely hidden from view, and does not impact on wildlife or conservation. This, in my opinion, is the best and only viable option, and at the end of the day, I am asking you to look beyond what you see on paper and take a more humanitarian view, because not everything in life is clear-cut. This is not about financial gain. This, to me, is all about the happiness and welfare of my child, and every child deserves some spaces to which they can call their own.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Joe, over to you.
Sorry. So I think this is a site that members visited yesterday to appreciate the impact of the extension on the, well, basically the host building and the principal listed building. The Design and Conservation Officer has assessed the proposals, and there's concerns with the siting coming off the range at a right angle and the scale of the extension. This is deemed to have a less than substantial harm on the principal listed building, and according to National Planning Policy Framework, this less than substantial harm needs to be outweighed by public benefit, which is difficult to be derived from a domestic extension. The benefits are generally to the owner of the property. As the applicants set out, there was pre-application advice discussions that did take place, which proposed a more linear extension. But this was, as the applicant set out, there was concerns about the removal and reinstatement of the original stone steps, so this wasn't deemed acceptable either. This is the applicant's attempt to address those concerns. I probably should outline as well, there is a secondary reason for refusal, that there's a lack of evidence been submitted to assess the impact on protected species. I guess I'm happy to take questions if there is any.
Members, questions? Councillor Burfoot.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a simple question, I think. So in this particular case, how would we define public benefit? What would the public benefit be here?
I think that's the view of officers, that you struggle to get public benefit from a domestic extension. I think we've had a number of applications where we've had a similar issue of trying to find some public benefit to be derived, but generally it's all to the private occupant of the property.
Okay. Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, look, referring to the pre-application advice, was any positive advice as to the sort of general parameters as to what would be acceptable here given? I note that nothing further was taken forward following the pre-application advice, but did you set out the parameters under which an extension would be acceptable?
I did just have a look at the pre-application response just before I came down to familiarise myself, and I think the response was that an extension of the gable elevation as submitted at pre-application was not considered to be acceptable, but it could be explored off other elevations, but then no further plans or discussions took place as to how this would take its form or the location of such. So this application, I guess, was the applicant's attempt to address those initial comments.
So you were satisfied at that stage that there was an acceptable, in principle, there was an acceptable form of extension?
I think at the pre-app stage, it's for this sort of applicant and architect to put forward different options for us, and then we can deem the acceptability of those options. And in this case, the first pre-app wasn't considered acceptable. I think we invited them to explore extensions off different elevations, and this is the applicant's attempt to do that.
Okay, any more questions, members? No, I'll move into debate. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it was a very interesting site visit we had yesterday. Do agree the stone steps part of the old farm building, or even been repaired or whatever, but they're still part of the original character of the building. And across the yard we saw there's the new garage block, which you can see on the picture now, which is built out of new brick, and the other bit to be finished off. But I think the position of this new extension, I think it's in the right location. It's in a less obtrusive location than anywhere else it could be put. It's very limited, as the applicant states. You know, the building's narrow. It's one of the only few places where they can put the extension. So I'm thinking of moving the recommendation against the officer's recommendation.
So you wanted to move it for approval then,
Yes,
Councillor
please,
Lees?
Chair.
Okay. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, like Stuart said, we went there yesterday, and it was strange that the objection to that extension on the back of there, which didn't seem to be doing anybody any harm, and yet all the new buildings around there, which has been allowed to carry on. So, again, I can't support the officer recommendation this, so I'll be seconding the recommendation for against officer recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come back on the motion that's on the table. So my understanding of the motion is that members are comfortable with the location, the scale and appearance of the extension to the extent they feel it will not be harmful to the heritage asset. That being the case, I think that would be a reasonable decision to arrive at. The only point I'd make to members at this stage is that we have a supplementary planning document on the conversion of former farm buildings. This particular range of buildings comes within the setting of a listed building, and they are deemed curtilage listed buildings. Their form, their simplicity of appearance is an important component of their special character and appearance. And I think it'd been reasonable for us to say it's impossible or you can't extend the building, but I think any extension should be sympathetic to the agricultural character and appearance of the buildings. And we're not happy with the form of the extension, the siting of it, and the harm or the impact it has on the heritage assets in this particular case.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Donnelly?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, but Chris, I don't see. You say for public interest and others, I don't see what harm. If it had been the other side of the building, the other side of the yard, I could appreciate that. But to me, it doesn't affect anything on the facade of that, really. So again, I can't support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Burford.
Thank you. Well, yes, we went to the site visit yesterday, and I think it was, you know, it was important that we did see it, and in its context. I think I've said previously at meetings that planning isn't a science, is it? It's not an exact science. And I think I'm right in saying that the NPPF is guidance. So I am of the same opinion as the previous two speakers in that my judgment, if you like, as a member of this planning committee is that this isn't an incongruous addition to this building. The harm is, well, I'm not sure there is any harm really, having looked round the site, and it doesn't have, there are no implications for anywhere else. It all sits as one site, and I think it's quite modest in scale. So on that basis, I am going to go along with recommendation for approval.
Right, Chris, I know you want to come back on something.
Yeah, I think if members are minded to approve this application, you just need to have regard to our duty to protect protected species, and there's a lack of information currently about the implication of the development on bats in particular. I think we're vulnerable to issuing an unsound decision without that information.
Could that be, I don't know whether the Movement Secretary want to delegate that authority to Chris to carry out further detailed assessment? Is that happy with, to add that as a condition, Chris?
I think if members were minded to approve the application, I think it would be on the basis that authority would be delegated to the development manager to be satisfied that they have an appropriate level of information to be satisfied that protected species wouldn't be adversely affected by this development. At that point, I think we could be satisfied that any decision, if you're satisfied that there's no harm here to the heritage asset, and therefore there's no need to consider the public benefit to be derived, that would be a more sound planning decision.
Councillor Lees and Donnelly, are you happy for that to be added?
I'm happy with that, Chair, yeah, because at some point when the building's been renovated previously, obviously the roof's been done, so I think bats, etc., they've been down that route before, so I'm happy for a condition if that's the case to, you know, the protected species.
Yeah, and of course we need to think about conditions. I don't know whether Chris wants to add anything to the standard conditions.
I'd suggest that we'd want to control the detail of the extension. So we'd want to have a thought at the very least for materials to match the existing building, statutory timeframe condition. Probably want to have a look at the details of windows and openings to make sure that they were acceptable in terms of preserving the building and the heritage asset. So they're all conditions that I would suggest, but that's a matter for members in terms of what they consider would be appropriate.
Councillor Lees, Councillor Donnan, are you happy with that as a mover and
Happy
second?
with that, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go along with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I do support the officer's recommendations here, both in respect to this application and, I think more importantly, the listed building application which follows. I'm not so much concerned by the National Planning Policy Framework debate, but I am concerned, much concerned by a decision to go against our own supplementary planning document, and I don't think that's a decision which we should take lightly. You know, we have a professional design and conservation officer who has looked at this very carefully in the context of the impact of the extension on the listed building, and has reached a professional judgment. And as the judgment is that it would have a detrimental impact on the existing listed building. And I think that is something which we should respect. Now, I listened carefully to what the applicant has said, and whilst one is sympathetic, of course, if you own a listed building, you are aware of the limitations that brings upon you. And I think, you know, in looking at changes to a listed building, you need to reflect on that always. That you buy the listed building and you own it, and you take it forward as a home, in the knowledge that there are limitations on what you can do. I mean, I have to say, it is a little bit disappointing that having received professional pre-application advice from our officers, that does not appear to have been taken forward by the applicant's design advisors. And I do think that there are alternatives which would both meet the needs, the obvious needs of the applicant, but satisfy our professional requirements as a local planning authority, and respect the listed building aspect of the proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak in debate before I move to the vote? Councillor Bull.
Obviously, I wasn't at the site visit, and I can understand both sides, and Councillor O'Brien's made a point of it is our SPD policy that we're looking into. Is there a way that this could be deferred for them to go back and have this pre-negotiation with them? Obviously, then you could get the issue as regards the wildlife, bats or whatever else that could be there, and the fact of the design and scope of what they intend to do. Would that be something that could be considered instead of it being an outright refusal?
We have an application before us for a 2-storey rear extension, and it's very much in the hands of the applicant as to whether they want to deviate from that development in terms of its nature and description, for us to be able to continue to determine this application as submitted. We could seek deferment to explore that with the applicant, but we'd be very much guided by them in terms of what their preferences were for extending this particular building.
Okay, anything else, Councillor Bull? No? In which case then we'll move to the vote. It's been moved and seconded for approval against officers' recommendations with the conditions that have been attached by Councillor Lees and Donnelly. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, so it's been carried, it's been approved. So moving swiftly on, we'll do the listed building consent now, which is the second part of this application. So we won't have another presentation because it's already been done. There's no speakers for this part. So questions for listed building consent? Anybody questions now? In which case then I'll...
Committee, just so we're all clear on what you're voting for here, this particular application is different to a full application in terms of the scope of our consideration. So we don't have to consider the impacts of this particular application on protected species. So if members are happy with the development in terms of its impact on the heritage asset, they could potentially vote to approve listed building consent. So it's not subject to the same controls or assessment as the previous full application, but you would still need to think about what conditions you'd want to impose or attach to any grant of listed building consent.
So no members' questions. Councillor Archer.
So just to clarify, so the conditions we put on in terms of making sure that the windows, doors, matching materials that we put on the last thing, the full application, do we need to attach those again to this one to try and do what we can to protect the building in terms of its listed elements?
We're in a slightly strange scenario, aren't we, where there isn't a guarantee that full planning permission will be granted, but I think in terms of the listed building consent application, the actual abutment of the extension to the listed building, the parts that require consent, I think we'd need to control those details. So I think it'd be specific to the parts of the works that require explicit listed building consent. I think it's just we need to be careful to control those details.
Can we put a condition in that we delegate that, the authority to the development manager to do that?
I think that would be reasonable in terms of safeguarding the special character and appearance of this former farm building.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Buttle.
Yes, I was just about to suggest pretty much the same thing. Either defer it until we've got an actual proper planning permission for what goes ahead, and then put it back through the system, or allow Chris to move it forward when he's ready.
Chris.
I think that would be, although they're completely different applications and the assessment of them is completely different, I think there's some logic to what you've just said there, Councillor Butler. I think it makes sense, doesn't it, to release the consent, listed building consent at a point where we've granted full planning permission for the works and there's some certainty that those works will take place.
I would be very happy if we did that. I don't know if I would need a second or need to propose anything. I'm not sure quite where I stand.
Right, so are you putting that as a
I'm quite
proposal on the table? Does that find a seconder from the floor? Councillor Archer. So that's on the table. Anybody else wishing to speak? No? I'll go into debate.
Can I just say something?
No, I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry. So I'll move into debate. Anybody wishing to speak in debate?
No, I'm happy to move it, Chair.
Not happy to move. It's been moved by Councillor Buttle, Neil already, and Councillor Archer.
I beg.
It's already been seconded, but anyway, Tom. Councillor Bull.
Thank you. I'll stop you from digging. Yeah, I think what Councillor Buttle has proposed here is beneficial, and I hope that the applicant does go away and works closely with the officers to succeed and get the benefit for everybody.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Anybody else wanted to speak? No? So it's been moved and seconded for deferred, as we've heard in committee. All those in favour, please show. Yeah, and what we need, I think what we need to say actually in committee is we give delegated authority to Chris to give a decision. Yep, are you quite happy following the grant of full planning? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that, yes.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, we'll take the vote again. All those in favour, please show. All those against? I think that's been carried. Anyway, thank you very much, members. So we'll get back.
Chair, can I just ask, does the applicant understand what's been approved?
Not really, no.
Can we explain it to her?
I think Chris is probably better because even I'm a little bit.
Yeah, just to be clear on in terms of what members have voted on there. So in the case of the full planning application, members have voted to approve, well, to give authority to myself to issue a decision following to our satisfaction that the impact of the development on protected species, in particular bats, has been fully considered. I think if bats are found to be within the building affected by the development, I think if in having to introduce some form of mitigation, that changed the development significantly in terms of the design of the extension. I think at that point, as officers, we'd probably have to present that back to planning committee. However, if there's no bats present and if the development doesn't affect bats, then we can grant the permission as set out, and then the list of building consent would follow.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, it's quite all right. So anyway, members, moving back to the agenda, item 5.1. There's a little bit of late rep, so I'll let you read the late reps on the Bradley Hall application. Anyway, members, have you finished reading the late reps? Okay, I have one speaker on this, Mr. Matthew Hewitt, the architect. Speak in favour of the application. You have 5 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I think I'm going to be quite brief anyway, just to reiterate some of the points from the last meeting. I really just want to say that it's a private dwelling, this house, and it may be listed, but the majority of the work that we're doing to the property is to the rear, and won't be seen by anybody. And I'm just concerned that the application may be prejudiced by some of the comments last time, primarily regarding the hot tubs, which are largely an environmental health concern, and the noise associated with them, and also what my client does for a living, which is he has a holiday rental business. But the property that he is planning to put a swimming pool onto is his own personal residence. The second thing really is there's already been a lot of effort and a lot of cost gone into sort of getting the proposal to where it stands now. Lots of professional services and advice, and obviously the recommendation for approval from the planning department and their conservation teams, and the Historic England. If you are of a mind to still refuse the application and go against the recommendation of planning, we will be forced to appeal this decision, and I, for one, certainly don't want my tax money going towards sort of having to appeal that decision. I'm fairly confident that we will get it through on appeal if it's not sort of approved. So that's really all I've got to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Joe, over to you again, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So members will recall this application being discussed at the previous committee, and it was deferred for a few reasons. One of them was, I've forgotten what they were now. One of them was to provide further clarification on the use of the property as a party house, which I think we've done in the committee report. The other one was to allow Historic England to provide comments, and they've got back to us with advising us to take the advice of our own in-house conservation officer. And the third reason for deferral was to find out if there was any matters of an ecclesiastical nature which needed to be addressed, which, having spoken to the Diocese of Derby, it transpires that there isn't. So the reasons for deferment have been addressed. I should also note as well, following the debate at the previous committee, we have attached a further condition to restrict the use of the swimming pool for private use of the occupants of Bradley Hall, and not as a commercial venture. I think that was raised in the debate previously. So yeah, I think I'm happy to take questions on this one.
Right, members, over to you. Questions? Councillor Archer.
I was just going to check about the conditioning for domestic use only. Is that, when we apply conditions such as that, is there a time limit on that? What happens, for example, if this owner, I know this may be speculative, but if this owner is to move out and sell the building on and a new owner came in, does the condition stay on the pool, or would the new owner, would that condition then go because it's changed hands?
The condition would stay with the property, yeah.
Okay, any more questions, members? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. And again, we've got a planning application and listed building consent application, and they're obviously different, but they're different but the same, if you know what I mean. First question, could you please set out very clearly which elements of the proposal require planning consent? When you look through the details, what precisely are we giving planning consent for of all the details of the proposals? And my second question relates to the hot tubs. I believe that the opinion is that the hot tubs themselves don't require planning permission, but the structures which enclose them do. I have to say I found that logic, if that's what you're saying, I have to find that logic rather strange, particularly as you say in the report that the structures enclosing the hot tubs are associated with them, so they are essentially one structure. But if that is what you're saying, could you please explain to me precisely why you don't think that the hot tubs, together with their structures, constitute a single development and are therefore require planning permission?
Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. There's a couple of points to come back on there. I think in terms of the description of development, so everything that needs planning permission is as described in the description of development in relation to the full application, and likewise the same applies to the application for listed building consent. Everything that requires listed building consent is described in the description of that particular application. In terms of what requires listed building consent, I think we have to refer back to the 1990 Listed Building and Conservation Area Act, and it's clear that a listed building is a building which is, for the time being, included in a list of complied compiled or approved by the Secretary of State under a section of the Act, and it specifically says any object or structure fixed to the listed building, or any object or structure within the curtilage of the building, which, although not fixed to the building, forms part of the land and has done so since before the 1st of July 1948. That sets out clearly what is within listing or to be considered as part of a listed building. So in terms of considering any works to that building, anything that's physically fixed to it, or anything that was in existence pre-1948 would be deemed to be curtilage listed and worthy of protection under the Act. So I'm hoping that answers the first part of your question. I think you make a valid point in relation to the hot tub and the associated structure. I think a hot tub in itself doesn't necessarily constitute development. I think we explored that at the last planning committee meeting, but what we're dealing with here is a hot tub and associated enclosure. And obviously if the hot tub is part of that construction, I think you could argue, well, that's part of the development. But in terms of our assessment and the impact on residential amenity, we have to have regard to a hot tub in that location. If that's not development, then what is the additional harm from associated with a structure that encloses such a facility within the grounds of a building such as Bradley Hall?
Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful. But I agree with you there, Chris. But you don't appear to be making any reference to the you don't appear to be proposing any conditions relating to the use of the hot tub. You appear to be relying entirely on environmental health legislation, and I wonder why that is, why you're not proposing conditions relating to when and how the hot tub shall be used, given that you now agree that they require planning and listed building consent.
I think it comes back to the tests in relation to conditions, and the fact that you could site a hot tub within the grounds of Bradley Hall without needing planning permission, and it's whether the conditions serve a planning purpose. I think bearing that in mind, it's only the structure enclosing the hot tub which requires planning permission, and hence that's the element that we're considering as part of this application.
Okay.
No, just to come back, you suggested I read carefully that what is set out for planning permission. It does say hot tubs. I read it. So you are saying that hot tubs could be used 24 hours a day, is that because there's no condition relating to when they should be used?
Yeah, it comes back to the reasonableness of a planning condition, bearing in mind that you could site a hot tub within the grounds of the building without requiring listed building consent.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Buttle.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris. This is, I think, one for you. I'm kind of a bit baffled as to how we balance the amenity being delivered to the surrounding people and the business creating a viable business in this place. Bradley Hall seems to be a bad neighbour. It doesn't seem to be treating its neighbours well. The story about the ambulance and all that sort of stuff, you know, like those are traumatic episodes for everybody in the neighbourhood to put up with. And I'm wondering how we can balance the amenity of them, you know, like creating some hot tub sheds, and us saying, well, they need to do that because, you know, they need the money. Is that what we're saying? Is that what we're saying?
What we're assessing here is the impact on the structures, on the setting of the listed building. We're happy with their location, their impact on the special character and the setting of the listed building. So we've assessed that part of the development. We accept there may be some associated disturbance with the use of the curtilages of the holiday let buildings that operate from the site. However, we can't control the use of the curtilage or amenity areas associated with those buildings. There's nothing to stop the current occupiers or people using those premises for whatever purpose, enjoying that amenity space. We can't control that through this application, which is just for structures within the grounds of those buildings.
Okay, I understand that, yes. So we're not passing judgment on the usage of the building.
Well, the use of the grounds is as amenity space, serving. I believe there's the main hall where the hot tubs are in association with other buildings on site that have got a lawful use as holiday let purposes, but they have associated curtilages, and the use of those curtilages is established.
I'm sorry, I'm just being clueless here. Does it not matter at all what people in the area have got to say about this? Is the fact that they feel their amenity is being seriously eroded by this and they're having a hard time, is that just nothing to do with us?
If we were considering the conversion of the buildings for holiday let use, and there was concerns about the extent of curtilage and the use of the curtilage and the impact it'd have on the residential amenity of occupants of nearby properties, then that would be potentially a legitimate concern. But here we have established lawful uses of the building and associated land. What we're considering as part of this application is just the structures.
Right, excellent. I understand that. Now, my other question was to do with what makes a heritage asset. If a heritage asset currently, and for the last 150 years, has been a hall and an orangery set to one side slightly, and then bringing the two together and turning it into a swimming pool, are we not actually stopping it being a heritage asset because it's not the same thing anymore?
The swimming pool is an ancillary element of the existing use of Bradley Hall as a single dwelling house. The applicants made it clear that it's their family home, and they intend to occupy the hall as a single dwelling house.
Oh yeah, I got you. Yeah, I understand that. It's just whether or not turning something from an orangery into a swimming pool changes the whole asset as a thing, because like one of them was about like saving the price of an orange, and the other one's about swimming up and down. They're different things.
Yes, it's still an ancillary component of the lawful use, and we're satisfied that a dwelling house of that scale and nature, I mean, it evolves over time. When it was used in early years as a private residence, you might have had other recreational uses. You might have had an area for lawn tennis, for example. An orangery was in fashion, might have been in fashion at a period of time. It doesn't stop the evolution of the building. The asset is a hall, and its optimal use is as a single residence, which was that was its original design and purpose, and that will continue, albeit in a modern context.
Great, thank you. I think I've got that. Thanks.
Councillor Bull.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be going on similar tracks to Councillor Buckler here. I think out of the whole cry of what the problem is definitely the constructions over the hot tubs. You could put a hot tub in the middle of a field and they can be in it. So if you take away the fact that they can put a construction there, they won't be using it at different times, maybe not. But so within these two applications, one's in the full WAD, it's got everything that they want. And in the second one, the listed buildings, that is just incorporating, changing and having the swimming pool. Yeah, I've got that right in as such. So in sense, what they want to achieve for their home private life is their accommodation being made where they've got an indoor swimming pool, which would have a door open for their own personal use, which we can put a condition on to say that that would carry for the whole prosperity of that building, irrespective of who owned it. But the one thing that we can't control out of all this, which is the problem things, which seems to be putting canopies up. So I'm just wondering whether, you know, where do we stand in the fact of it? They're the stumbling block, I feel, within all this.
It's just all been conclued together. How do we, you know, because we can't pass one without the other on the full, but on the list of buildings, there's no hot tub in it.
Just to provide some sort of clarity to what's being applied for here. So we've got development within the curtilage of the listed building. Because there's no physical attachment and the buildings themselves are not being converted, not pre-1948, they don't require listed building consents. That's why those structures are included in the full planning application, because the permitted development order doesn't allow for outbuildings within the curtilage of listed buildings without the need for a full planning application. But we've also got 3 planning units, I believe, here as well. We've got the main hall, and then we've got associated buildings that have been converted to holiday let use, and those uses have been established for a number of years.
I've not got no problem with the fact we've already stated that. It's actually the canopies that you're putting over the hot tubs, which are becoming the biggest issue out of all of this, which we don't have any control over. And they've already been done, so I can't see how they could be within this application as regards the letting bit, because they're already done, dusted and everything else, and they're not asking for the letting parts of the building to be developed.
No, I think we can control, or we can assess the appropriateness of the structures, and that's what's before members this evening. If members felt that the structures were harmful to the setting of the listed building, then that's within their gift to recommend refusal of the application. However, as officers, we've considered the proposals in detail, and so has the council's conservation and design officer, and they feel that the siting of those structures and their impact on the listed building is such that they don't result in harm, and therefore the heritage asset is conserved in this case, and there's no grounds for refusal on that basis.
Okay, Councillor Bull. Councillor O'Brien.
Sorry to come back again, Chair. Paragraph 3.2 in your report, Chris, says the application seeks retrospective planning permission for the installation of 2 hot tubs. So, can you confirm these 2 hot tubs are associated with the holiday letting, not with the domestic element of the building? And are you saying that as we're considering an application for retrospective planning permission for the installation of 2 hot tubs, that the amenity considerations are not relevant? Is that what you're telling us? Despite the fact that this is a retrospective planning application for the installation of 2 hot tubs?
I think we covered it earlier on, but what we're saying is that the structures which include the hot tubs require planning permission. The point I'm making is that we have to be reasonable in our assessment of the application, and the siting of a hot tub within the grounds of a property wouldn't normally constitute development. The development here is the hot tubs and the associated structure. So in terms of the reasonableness of our assessment, if we were to refuse the application on amenity grounds, an inspector looking at this would say, well, a hot tub can be sited in this location. What is the material difference between a hot tub and a hot tub within an enclosure? The enclosure element and the built development part is considered to be acceptable in terms of the impact on the heritage asset in this case.
Councillor Archer.
Just on the structure, the way I see it, just to clarify if I'm right on this, the structures themselves are the things that need the planning permission. The concern here, I think, is that the structures are potentially encouraging people to stay in the hot tubs later and then to be a more of a social space where people will be sitting around drinking and being noisy. So if we were to go against allowing the structures around the hot tubs to remain, that would probably have the effect of making noise pollution late in the evening less likely, because people will be less likely to stay late. So, but I suspect you're going to tell me that's not a planning consideration, so we can't really consider that at this meeting. But, you know, I'm thinking, the hot tubs, don't need planning permission, but the structures do. If you remove the structures, you remove potentially some of the late night noise disruption because it will discourage people from using the hot tubs late. So is that something we could consider as a planning consideration or not?
I think you make a valid point in that the structure, if you felt the structure was encouraging the use of the hot tubs late into the evenings at unsocial hours, resulting in adverse impacts on amenity, then that's an argument you could potentially present. I don't think it's a strong argument at appeal, and I think I'm not going to say we're vulnerable to an award of cost, but there are other legislation that deals with nuisance that could be utilised in this case. If the hot tub was being used late into the evening and that was resulting in nuisance, then we have environmental health powers to deal with that. You'd have to be satisfied that there's a material difference between a hot tub and a hot tub in an enclosure, and that material impact is so significant that it warrants refusal on amenity grounds in this case. I think you'd be struggling to make that argument, but that's for members to consider.
So we could make the argument, but you think on planning law and it would not stand?
In my professional judgment, I think it's a weak argument. However, it's not. I don't want to say it'd be impossible to defend. That's a matter for members.
Okay, so I've got nobody else down for questions, so I'll move into debate. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have two issues with the planning application rather than listed building consent. I found it strange that the swimming pool element is being recommended for refusal in its current form. I have to say I've looked at it very carefully. I've looked at the application very carefully. I've read very carefully several times the views of our design and conservation officer, but I have to say that the
Chair, can I just ask Councillor O'Brien just to reiterate, because you did say refusal here, and are looking at this and it says approval, so can you just reiterate what you're trying to say? Sorry, Chair.
No, you're quite all right, Councillor.
well, I'm just making a comment at the moment. I wasn't necessarily going to make a recommendation.
No, I didn't say you were, but you said because you were surprised that the officers have refused the swimming pool.
Oh, sorry, I'm surprised. Well, sorry, what I meant to say.
That's what the clarification was.
I apologise for my poor diction. What I meant to say. It'd be helpful if it were on the screen, actually, Chris. The swimming pool elevation. I was surprised at the officers' recommendation, making recommendation to approve the swimming pool element in its current form. My view is that is not an appropriate form of development, and in that it doesn't respect either of the listed buildings, and I think that is the key issue here. We have two listed buildings, two listed structures, and we have a swimming pool proposed swimming pool extension of a design which, in my view, does not provide the sort of respect that I consider it should do. The fact that people can't see developments is not really relevant when you're considering the impact on a listed building. It's the impact on the building which is relevant, rather than whether members of the public can see it. I think we do need to bear that in mind. So I'm surprised at that. And I have to say, when I asked what we're actually being asked to give planning permission for, I was advised to read the development. And the description of the development says hot tub canopy and hot tub. And that is reinforced in paragraph 3.2, which talks about planning permission for the installation of 2 hot tubs. So as far as I'm concerned, we are being asked to give planning permission for 2 hot tubs, which have an associated canopy structure. This is what paragraph 3.2 tells us. I can only go by what I see in front of me. The planning application for 2 hot tubs and associated canopy structure. So I cannot think that we should I don't have a problem with there being a hot tub with a canopy here, in principle, but I do think we have to respect the amenities of local residents. We also have to respect the fact that we have a church building within a clear sight of one of the hot tubs. I would hate to think that we have people using a hot tub at the same time as a church service, for example, were going on. I think that would be totally disrespectful, as it would be totally disrespectful to have hot tubs being used any time of the night or day. So I do think if we are to consider giving planning consent for that part of the application, that is the installation of 2 hot tubs, then we should put stringent conditions on the time of day and perhaps the number of people, but certainly the time of day, that those hot tubs should be used, because they clearly are to be used in association with the holiday development. They have nothing to do with the occupants of Bradley Hall itself. They're there for the benefit of holiday makers, and holiday makers come on holiday to enjoy themselves, as we all do. But they need to respect the neighbourhood. So I'll listen carefully to what others would say, but I would hope that if someone makes a recommendation to approve this in relation to that latter point, that they reflect what I've said and would ask that there are strict conditions on when those hot tubs should be used.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I'll just read what I've been writing down. I mean, a lot has been said and discussed about this application, and more has been said tonight after last time's meeting. And I do think we must thank the officers, for their hard work and the great deal of time they spent on it, because obviously it's not a tricky one. I think in the back of our minds we've got the morality, perhaps, of this place and good neighbourliness, but we're a planning committee, and we've got to operate through the planning rules that we've been given and that we've been trained about. Now, I'm not a neighbour of Bradley Hall, but I do appreciate the passionate submissions of the locals of Bradley. But I really fear we can go on about the minutiae of 1 hot tub, 2 hot tubs, the canopy, the size and mass of the swimming pool. And yes, I agree with Peter O'Brien that it is quite large. But our officers have said that in their opinion, and in Mark Askey's opinion, correct, that it's acceptable. So I'm finding it, although I know we want to try and find a reason not to grant this application, I'm really fearing that it's going to be very difficult. And again, we have that ghastly word retrospective that I think that we might hear again tonight as well, which is always a great shame. But I'm really feeling that I feel that there's no reasonable planning reasons. We can go on about, as I say, some of the minutiae on this, or some of the mass, the size and the mass. But I really think that we have to get something on the table so we can discuss and actually vote on it to get this thing moving forward. And if it fails, it goes to the appeal, as the applicant's architect said in his submission earlier. And so I could say reluctantly, but practically, and expediently is wrong. Practically, I think that I'm going to move for approval on this very, very difficult application as per officer recommendation, but with a side request, not a condition, a side request that, I read from Duncan Bratt on behalf of All Saints Church, Bradley, that those of us who live in the south have been there, and it's a lovely little church, it really is, that they have no further objection on the basis that, as per the consent, it is a private residence, the basis of a private residence. 2, the swimming pool is not used for commercial purposes. We can't administer it. We're just the planning committee, and the hot tubs are properly controlled. With the side request that those things are respected, out of a need for village neighbourliness and village amenity and just the general welfare of all the residents of Bradley. So, and that if there are problems, that those issues are addressed respectfully and hopefully quickly. I don't think we as a planning authority, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we as a planning authority can issue conditions on that. So I'd like to move the Office of Recommendation on this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzgerald. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Statham?
Yes, Chair, I'll second it. I think Councillor Fitzgerald has gone through it all quite well. We've all been on the train. We know that we haven't got a leg to stand on if we do turn it down. So I'm happy to second it, Chair. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I'd like to thank Councillor Fitzgerald because I've written a lot of stuff down here myself, and a lot of the tone of what you've said there is very similar to what I was thinking, really. You know, Bradley's a village that's very close to my heart, actually. I grew up there, went to school there. Family members buried across the road from this property. And I think what's important is that everybody involved realises that this hall is of huge importance to the village as a whole. It is a key heritage asset. It is crucial to the village, the identity of the village, and therefore it's crucial to all the villagers, not just the owner who really is a custodian of this heritage asset for the village. And the village and the villagers, they want an owner of this hall who understands this and is respectful to the community, and someone who owns that asset, who cares for the village as well as caring for the hall as a heritage asset, which is at the heart of the village and the community. You know, with that in mind, it is really alarming to see this sort of concerns caused by this application, the suspicion and bad feeling. But it's also, I have to say, encouraging to see the comments of the PCC suggesting the community is willing to try and trust and accept these proposals in good faith, on the condition that it is domestic use only, and that the owner does more, and that's really crucial, to monitor the use of the hot tubs, which seem to be at the centre of the controversy. Now, even in Mr. and Mrs. Rees's quite powerful testament and concerning testament, if you were a neighbour of this property, even they acknowledge at the end that if there's conditions relating to domestic use only, they seem to be suggesting that they're prepared to accept the proposal with the correct conditions, of which I think we've now got in place in terms of domestic use only. So if we do vote this through tonight, which I suspect we're moving in that direction, then the onus then is very much on the applicant to do all that he can to be the best neighbour he can, and to accept his position as a custodian of a key heritage asset at the heart of the village, as well as his role as owner of this property to develop it as he has the right to do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Archer. Anybody else wanted to speak in debate before I move to the vote? No? So it's been moved and seconded for approval subject to conditions in the report. All those in favour, please shout. All those against? 4. And any abstentions? 1. So the motion has been carried. It's been approved. So we'll move on to the listed building consent. Joe, is there anything you want to add?
I don't think there's anything to add.
All right, members, questions? No? No questions then? Oh, Councillor Bull. And Councillor Fitzgerald.
Obviously, with this, on the conditions about from our conservation officer, as making sure that the walls, that the windows and the frames, providing that they are originally were open to the floor and not. So all this will be adhered to prior to anything being destroyed or anything else within within our report here. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I did actually, following the last committee meeting, I did show our design and conservation officer some more detailed photographs of those elements, and he's satisfied that they did previously used to be openings, and it's been bricked up since, so it's reverting it back to being a historic opening.
All right, so it's been checked.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fitzgerald. We're in question, but do you want to put it down for debate? Councillor O'Brien has a question.
Yes, I want to go back, Chair, to this, the two new large windows issue which Councillor Bull referred to. Can you confirm that this part of the building, this listed element, was built as a barn, and therefore it's likely that those openings, if they were full length, which you're saying they were, they would have been timber doors? And you think that's a likely proposition, given that it was a barn?
I honestly don't know without looking into the history. I know that part of the building was a stable as well, so it potentially is likely that there was barn doors to those elements. But as I say, from speaking to the conservation officer, he's satisfied that the brickwork is new and that those were fully to the floor openings previously. I don't know what the sort of fixings to those openings were, but I think that's the position.
No, I'm sort of asking your opinion. You confirm it was built as a barn originally? Stable block and barn.
Yeah, and I think the openings indicate that as well, yeah, I'd say.
On that basis, do you think it's likely that the openings would have been timber doors? That would be, do you agree with me? That would be likely.
They may well have been, yeah.
Okay, any more questions, members? No, I'll move into debate then. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you. Well, once again, I won't repeat what I said a few moments ago, but I'll move the listed buildings.
Councillor Statham.
Yes, I'll second the motion, Chair.
Anybody else wishing to speak in debate? Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, I have two concerns here. The first relates to the last point question I made there. On the basis that the two openings on the southern elevation there, which are proposed to be converted from half glazed openings to fully glazed openings, given that this is a listed builder consent application where we need to be ensure that any alterations to the listed building clearly respect the original design of the building, I don't think that a fully glazed opening meets that test, I have to say. As we've heard, that it's very likely that the original openings there would have been fully timbered. They would have been timber doors, given that the opening was full height length, and therefore I can't support that element which replaces what was originally most likely a fully timbered opening with a fully glazed opening. I don't think that at all respects the listed building, whereas what's currently there I think does. The second is on the design of the swimming pool element. As I said earlier, I personally don't think that the design particularly reflects the design of the listed building, but I particularly don't think, well, I particularly think that the comments of our design and conservation officer are the fact that they're being not taken fully into account. I don't agree with that. I think the points that the design and conservation officer makes about the design should have been respected, and that we should have asked the applicant to amend that design detail as the design and conservation officer has suggested, because that is the way that we're actually ensuring that the swimming pool extension does reflect the detail of the existing building, and ignoring his advice, I think, is well, I don't really understand why we have a design and conservation officer and then ignore his advice. So again, if you're insisting on continuing to ignore his advice, and I'm not able to support that element either.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris, something, or Joe, do you want to come back on that?
I think we've included all the conditions requested by the Conservation Officer, with the exception of the, as I say, removing the brickwork to the bottom of those openings. As far as I'm aware, we've included the conditions requested by the Design and Conservation Officer. As I say, I've subsequently discussed with the Conservation Officer with more detailed photographs of those openings, and I think his view is that whilst there might not have initially been fully glazed openings, the removal of the brickwork into a fully open doorway would be closer to the original building rather than a half bricked up opening. So I think we have taken into account the Design and Conservation Officer's comments in this case.
As a point of information, Chair, I have to point out on page 27 that actually is not the case in respect to the design of the swimming pool lintel. You have not agreed with your Design and Conservation Officer's advice.
Okay, members, it's been moved and seconded for approval as set out in the report. Approval subject to conditions. All those in favour, please show. All those against? So the motion for the listed building consent has fallen. So we now need a motion for refusal, I believe. If you want to clarify. Yeah. So members, it's open to you.
I will move that the application is formally refused.
Sorry, can I ask a question, Mr. Chair, a point of order on this?
Of course you can.
We passed the general motion. This is obviously about the detail of that. Can we? To me, this is all about the specifics and the detail on the listed building. I assume we're not allowed to defer this one. Or should we can? Councillor O'Brien can vote, can propose for refusal. We can take the vote. I don't know. Sorry, I need a bit of clarity. Sorry.
Chris.
Yeah, Chair, I think just to provide some clarity here, I think we have to go back again to the Principal Act and what we're actually considering in respect of this application. Members have just granted full planning permission for an extension to this building. The list of building consent, you could argue, is the act of physical attachment and fixing of the extension to the building. Therefore, I'm not sure what grounds upon which you're looking to refuse the application if that's members' intention.
I think, Chair, no. I'm happy to propose a deferral for further negotiation. We've agreed in the planning consent the principle of a swimming pool extension. As far as this element is concerned, we've not approved the detail of the swimming pool. As we were clear, there are two elements. There's a planning permission, which is much more concerned with the principle, and then the listed building consent is concerned with the detail and the impact on the listed building. I'm quite happy to propose a deferment such that we ask our planning officers and design and conservation officer to go back and renegotiate certain aspects of the design so that it much more reflects protects the character of the listed building.
I think it's a totally unreasonable request in my view. I think members have voted on a full planning application which has clearly given approval for an extension of the design form and siting as set out in the application form. If members are now wanting to revisit that decision, I think that's an unreasonable decision to make in respect of our consideration in respect of the associated listed building consent application.
I'm going to raise a point of order here, Chair. The planning application made no reference to the window openings. We were not giving planning permission for the window openings. I have made a point with regard to the listed building consent concerning the window openings, and that to me is an entirely legitimate point to make. And you can't say that we cannot refuse this because we've already given permission for the development. We have not given permission for the window openings because you were clear that that was not part of the planning application. So we have not given permission for it.
I think if the motion is to seek deferment of that element, so we're just dealing with the openings part of it, I need to understand what the reason for deferment was and what members were looking to achieve in terms of whether that is a reasonable motion to put on the table. And just to clarify, there is a condition about the windows as well, so we can control that detail.
Councillor Buttle.
I'm quite happy to second Peter's deferral motion. I've not been comfortable with the way the way the swimming pool and the kitchen elements sit together with the building. There are those the 3 or could be 6 roof lights. There's the way the doors and the bottom will face onto the back of the building. The whole thing I've been quite uncomfortable with it from the very beginning, but I assumed that we had that in control. But I'm very happy for us to move forward with actually pinning that down before we say let's go.
Well, what I really need is from Councillor O'Brien is a definitive as to why we are deferring it.
I haven't put forward a proposal for deferment. I was asked to put forward a motion for refusal.
Well,
which Chair you asked
just
me
one
to
minute.
do.
Councillor Butler has just said he'd second your motion for deferral, so even I'm slightly confused.
Well, what I did say that if colleagues would prefer, I'm more than happy to allow Councillor Buttle to put forward a proposal for deferral, which I will second, and we can articulate a number of quite reasonable reasons for that deferment.
Councillor Buttle?
Yes, I'd very much like to do that. I'd like to move deferral until we have got absolutely pinned down what's happening with the windows and doors and the way that building is being linked into the main building.
I still need a steer from you for reasons for deferral, so it's left to be wrapped up in planning legislation.
Okay. I think I probably need some help on the official method.
To try and assist Councillor Buttle, I think what you're saying is that you'd want to consider the details of the openings before considering the appropriateness of the works on the listed building. At the moment, we've conditioned that detail, but presumably you'd want to see the details be satisfied there wouldn't be any harm to the heritage asset before making a decision on the application.
Actually, yes, that is right. Yeah, I would like that very much. I would like to see what it is that's happening there, because from the very beginning, from standing behind that building, it didn't feel right. So I'd like to know what's happening with the bottom edge, and I'd like to see before we go for it.
Are you happy with that, Chris? Not really, but it's on the table.
I'm sorry.
I think it's
I'm doing the best I can. I just want it to be right.
The difference is what you're saying is that if you were to grant permission now, that authority is delegated to officers, isn't it, to consider the detail and the appropriateness of it. I think what you're saying is you want to consider the appropriateness before granting listed building consent. I think is a reasonable motion.
I'm quite happy to either. I'm sorry. I'm quite happy for it to either come back to us or to go to our heritage conservation officer for an actual pinning down of what it is that's happening and what it is that's happening fits in. But I'm very happy for it to come back here.
So what we're asking then is for us to secure those details from the applicant, present those to committee for members to be satisfied that there wouldn't be any harm to the heritage asset. And
I think that would be
great.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I'll move that.
So you're happy with that? Neil?
Yes, I am.
Are you happy with that, Peter?
I'm 75% happy with that. I think we need to make it clear in the deferral that we do not think that the current proposal fully, the details of the current proposal fully respect the two existing listed buildings. I think it's important to make it clear that we have concerns about the detail. What we're not saying is we want you to reassess them and come back saying we still think they're fine. What I think I'm saying is that there are some elements which we don't think are fine, and we would like them to be revisited by the applicant's agent. So with that 25% addition, which makes it clear that there are some elements relating to the design of the openings and the design of the swimming pool extension that we're not comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like you're amending the original. So, I mean, you need to be clear on the specifics, I feel. I mean, I've taken advice from me. I've taken advice from Chris. So, if you're happy with 75% and the other 25%, we need to know which 25% you aren't happy with so we can wrap it up in the deferral so we can go back to officers and ask the questions.
Well, what I was saying,
Would
Chair,
you like me to give you a few minutes to think about it while I go to another speaker and then I'll come back to you? Yes? Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify with Chris, if possible, please, because is not the listed buildings side of it similar to reserved matters that would come back with design and the likes in planning? Usually when we have an open field and you'll say we want planning permission for 100 houses on there, you're either doing it or you don't. But at that point in time, we don't say that them houses are going to be built with windows like this or like that. So isn't this listed buildings in the similar context? Have I got it the right way or not? And if that's the case, then I think we should be deferring it because there will be impact on the heritage asset. And I think that needs to be looked in a little bit more with the design of what they're going to use to change what we've said on the first bit. The principle of the planning is there, but we want to make sure it's in fitting and in keeping with the heritage assets that is already there. Surely that is something that we are right to say.
I think if members are concerned about that particular detail and want to consider that in terms of the appropriateness of granting listed building consent, I think that is a reasonable position to adopt. The difference being that if you were to grant listed building consent, because of the nature of the conditions, you'd be effectively giving officers the authority to consider that detail. Whereas what I think you're asking is that you want to see that detail first to be satisfied there wouldn't be any harm to the heritage asset. And I think that's a reasonable position.
Yep, Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Jolt matters. Have we got a full detailed plan of the internal layout as it would be? Does that help anybody any more?
No, they don't really help people, these pictures sometimes, Stuart.
I think the openings that Councillor O'Brien was referring to with the brickwork at the bottom are shown on the bottom image of this plan. It is the arched openings to there's two arched openings that are the same. As you'll see from this plan, at the moment there's brickwork at the bottom, and then this plan, they're fully opened.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the listed building aspect of it. In creating a swimming pool, there's got to be some depth of dig somewhere on the line alongside of this listed building, and I think that's going to cause, I know it's a building regulation side of it, but it's also going to cause damage to in my thinking, to the structure that's listed already.
Chris, do you want to come back on anything?
Members have granted planning permission for the swimming pool extension. Here we're dealing with the listed building consent element. So the impact on historic fabric is what we're considering here, and the actual extension and the physical attachment to the listed building and alterations to fabric. So you can see on those drawings that the windows in question, those openings are clearly there. What you're asking to look at is the appropriateness of the new windows in terms of whether the brickwork should be removed and the design of the windows that would be inserted within that historic opening. I think we all accept that the opening was there. The windows will be reinstated or introduced within a historic opening.
Okay, so do we all know, because I'm a little bit confused at the moment, so I think as I get it, we want it deferring for the issues the windows, I believe, Councillor O'Brien, if that's what your 25% is about.
I think, Chair, if you look at page 12 of the report, paragraph 4, the bullet points there, that clearly sets out the reservations that the design and conservation area has. I know this is in the planning application side, but that's where it's set out. That clearly sets out the reservations that the design and conservation area has about the design, some of the design of the new swimming pool. Councillor Buttles also, I think, quite rightly referred to issues related to other aspects to do with the lantern windows. I think broadly the concerns expressed by the design and conservation area are the principal reasons for deferral, and they need to be addressed in line with his comments. I additionally personally feel that the two new fully height glazed window openings are inappropriate. But so those are the principal reasons for deferral.
Chris, are they reasonable?
Just to clarify, we can't revisit the general design of the extension that's been granted full planning permission. I think what we can control is the details that require listed building consent. So I think if Councillor O'Brien is not happy with the full height windows that have been introduced within those historic openings, I think we need a clear steer from him as to what he would like to see in place of those to address the Conservation Officer's comments.
Councillor O'Brien?
I'm sorry, Chair, we're going round in circles. It isn't about me. The meeting voted to refuse the listed building consent. Let's just bear that in mind. You suggested that we should now move to a deferral. You've had articulated by a number of us here our concerns about the design of the window openings and the design of the swimming pool. And this is a listed building consent application. It's not, it's separate from the planning application and needs to be considered separately. We can't say just because we've approved a planning application that therefore we have to approve the listed building consent application. The legislation doesn't work that way. This is a separate application. And I think we've clearly between us set out the areas of concern which need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. So in which case it's been moved for deferred as the points raised. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? I'm not going to use my casting vote. Nope, I'm not using my casting vote. Exactly. Lee, do you want to get some clarification on that? Sorry, Lee.
That's fine. Very simple, Chair. You've approved the planning application when it comes to listed building consent. You've not approved it, and you've decided not to give reasons or defer it.
We just voted, so which way was the vote?
It was tied.
It was tied.
It was tied. and the chair has refused to use a casting vote, so it's a tied vote.
Shall we go to penalties?
No. So, I'll tell you what, after that we will have a 10-minute recess. So, people want to be back for 28, we'll start again on the rest of the agenda. It was one of them that he declared an interest in. So anyway, moving swiftly on, let me find my place. I even half forgot where I've got.
Can I just check? Have we finished the discussion of the pre? Is that?
Yes, yeah.
So can we explain where we are with it?
There was no decision, so it'll come back to the next planning committee. Is my understanding. Anyway, members, application item number 5.1, application 21/01336 full, Harbour Rocks Clay Shoot, Many Stones Lane, Brassington, changes use from agriculture to mixed agriculture and clay shooting ground. This is a retrospective. I have got some speakers on this, and there is, I think, some late representation. So I'll let you look at the late representation, and then we'll have the speakers. Okay. I'm afraid you can't speak unless I ask you to come and speak. Sorry, Doc.
That's okay. I just haven't seen the representations, the latest ones. I don't know if it's wrong.
Could you give the lady a copy of the late reps, please? Right, members, are you happy? Would you want a bit more time? Want a bit more time now? Okay, members? Yep. Right. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 speakers, 5 speakers actually. The first is Mrs. Dawn Newton, the applicant, to speak in favour of the application. You have 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are supporting the local economy and in turn supporting the local community. Clients travel from all over the country to our simulated game days. They use local hotels, guest houses and B&Bs. They eat and drink at local pubs, bring their families and make a weekend of it. The Miners' Arms in Brassington provides the catering for these days. Holiday makers using local holiday cottages and B&Bs often want to have a go at clay pigeon shooting. We see this as a value add to anyone owning a holiday home, as an activity close by for them to do. Food for our competition shoots is sourced locally. Equipment and vehicles are serviced locally. All our maintenance supplies are bought locally. We support our local brewery, Old Walk Ales, when we hold charity events by having them on site. Last year, we raised £10,500 on one charity event in aid of the Sean Smith Foundation. The landowner benefits from income by diversifying. His livestock is watched over and his land is maintained. We have improved the access lane to the shoot, which makes for a smoother footpath and cycle path. We are very grateful to the officers for making their recommendation after having thoroughly investigated our application. Thank you very much, and we hope you make the decision in accordance with the recommendations made.
Thank you very much. Very succinct. Next on my list is Mr. Ray Smith, a local resident, to speak against the application. You have 3 minutes, and I will let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Before we start, can I keep my mask on or should I take it off? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can perfectly. It's entirely up to you.
Thank you. This is an application that affects 6 of your constituency villages: Brassington, Carsington, Hopton, Hogneston, Elton and Ible. Numerous representations from them explaining the upset that they already have as a result of the noise. The applicant suggests that there is a legal limit to the decibel level, which is wrong in law, in my respectable opinion. The Chartered Institute of Environmental Health leaflet is referred to, but it misses out in any of the documentation that I've seen the most important sentence, which is that there is no fixed shooting noise levels at which annoyance starts to occur. What that we should be doing, according to the documentation, is they say the assessment of whether the noise experienced is noise at noise-sensitive premises, which on page 14 includes residences, is a nuisance, will be a judgment based on a number of factors. Now, the Supreme Court, which is replaced the House of Lords, it's the highest court in the land, has given guidance in the case of Coventry and Lawrence, and I have notified your legal department about this and what I shall be saying, so you might want to take advice from them. But following a review of the law dating back to 1826, the court held that in deciding whether an activity caused a noise nuisance, the court had to assess the level of noise which a normal person would find reasonable to have to put up with, given the established pattern of uses or character of the locality. In this case, of course, we're talking about rural residential. Moving on then, you've seen from the application, from the objections, that people are already suffering. One, in fact, described it as saying it's as though it seems perfectly acceptable for shooters to visit the shoot, spend a couple of hours with a gun, and then probably retire home to a peaceful environment where they live. There are a number of objections, as I mentioned, but they're only from people who know about this application. There are an awful lot of people who don't even know about it still. They come from all of the villages that are involved. In summary, I would submit that this application should, in fact, be refused because of the...
30 seconds left.
Yeah. I further submit that as a result of the Environmental Protection Act 1990, a survey should be carried out and abatement notices considered in respect of both of the shoots, because there are 2, one either side of the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have on my list is Miss Libba Jones. To speak against the application, you have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
My name's Libba Jones and I'm a local resident living in Hopton. The application directly affects the surrounding parishes of Brassington, Carsington, Hopton and possibly Bonsall. It also affects residents and visitors walking, cycling and riding on both the High Peak Trail and the Round Reservoir Path and all those holiday makers staying in the villages. There have been over 120 comments, both for and against, on the website. The majority of supporting comments were left during a short period after a Facebook campaign by the gun clubs. Only 1 or 2 supporters live in the immediate locality, and all representations mention the amenity value of the club and how it is a well-run business. No one disputes this. Virtually without exception, all objections are from local residents and concern the level and type of noise emitting from the shoots. Gunshot noise is clearly heard in both Hopton and Carsington. That shows everywhere, every resident who's reported hearing regular gunshot noise. Most residents expect to live with this as an occasional noise nuisance, probably explaining why the applicant has had no noise complaints to date. That doesn't mean the gunshots cannot be heard. Another key point made was that it's not only the decibel levels that should be considered, but also the type of noise. Gunshots are rapid, incessant and unpredictable bursts of noise and definitely intrusive. The noise survey results from the 2 to 3 days monitored by the applicant, Blue Tree Acoustics and the DDDC Environmental Health are completely at odds with the actual experience of villagers. Survey results show either none or only barely audible gunshot noise at locations monitored, and to the best of our knowledge, no residents were asked about noise levels they experienced on other occasions. We have approximately 60 households on our village WhatsApp, and on an online village poll showed that out of 48 household responses, 44, that's 92%, agreed that the shooting noise from Harbour Rocks is too disturbing to accept the application to increase to 215 days per annum. This is opposed to 4 who did not agree. The noise is heard at properties all the way through the villages in Carsington and Hopton, from top of the town right through to Hopton, across the reservoir and outlying farms. My conclusion is that these very differing findings must be the result of weather conditions at the time. Apparently, temperature inversion and wind direction both have massive impact on noise readings. Most importantly, the correct decision must be based on the correct information. I'm sure both scenarios can be true, dependent on weather conditions. Bearing in mind that the shooting is already happening on more days than legally permitted, isn't the best decision simply to defer the application whilst more comprehensive noise surveys, agreed between all parties, take place over a longer period of time under different weather and wind conditions, so we can get to the bottom of this discrepancy and a more accurate study be produced.
30 seconds left.
Currently, shooting can take place for up to 28 days per year without the need for planning permission. The applicant regularly exceeds this limit and is now applying for permission to extend this further for him and any future owner up to 215 operating days a year. As you know, Carsington and Hopton PC have registered their own concerns. Sadly, we don't currently have a ward councillor in post to represent us. It would be wrong to approve the considerable increase to 215 full operating days and then find out that the local community experience is correct, or vice versa. If, however, the committee feel they have to follow...
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
The next on my list is Councillor Ruth Miles, Chair of Carsington Hopton Parish Council, speaking out this application. You have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to start by pointing out that no one I've spoken to about this application would like the shooting at Harbour Rocks to stop completely and as a result cease trading. It is a local business and we're supportive of that. However, we feel very strongly that what is being proposed in terms of number of days and hours of shooting, which is 250 days per year from 9 in the morning till 9 in the evening, would be unbearable. The noise of the shoot can be audible right across the parish, and residents have reached out both verbally and in writing via opposition to the application stating this. The noise is repeatable bangs. Currently, whilst heard, residents know that this is for a limited time and will stop, and generally only for a number of hours. The noise report which was undertaken was for a limited period of time, only a number of days. It doesn't take into consideration different wind directions, multiple locations across the parish, correlation with different shoot volumes, for example, number of guns and events of various sizes. Support I see has been registered by members or users of the facility who like to participate in the events. Understandably, they don't want to see the stopping. However, a lot of supporters are outside neighbouring villages. These include Leicester, South Wingfield, Cryche and Matlock. Thus, individuals are not privy to the repeatable bangs that is experienced amongst the parish of Hopton and Carsington. I would like to suggest to the committee that a balanced approach should be sought for a way forward.
215 days from 9 in the morning till 9 at night would be intolerable and quite hard to comprehend how an impact would have of this on beyond the parish of Carsington Hopton. And a reduced duration in terms of number of days and duration of time would be more favourable, and I would urge to be considered. I would also like it to be considered that a far more comprehensive noise survey is undertaken at several fixed locations over a longer duration. This wider consideration of factors such as climate, wind direction, and accompany this with the size of shoots on a number of days, number of guns, would be providing a more accurate reflection of what can be heard. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. The last on my list is Councillor Hedger, Chair of Brassington Parish Council. You have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when 30 seconds are left.
Good evening. I live in Brassington, and I'm against this application. I would like to highlight that in regard to the prominence of the Brassington Parish Council in the report and their response, I would like to bring the following matters to the Council attention. I believe the PC vote was flawed as the Council, some of the Council are not there their duty in relation to the conflict of interest and where such a conflict exists. This is for the following reasons. A number of the councillors confirmed that they were friends in regards to the applicants or the landowner who would benefit financially. The Brassington Parish Council Code of Conduct, which is drawn up in pursuant to Section 27 of the Localism Act 2011, states that where a matter arises at a meeting which relates to the financial interest of a friend, relative, or close associate, council must disclose the nature of the interest and not vote in the matter. This was discussed with Dow, who have informed me that there was very little that can be done in regards to the vote, but training should be given, and that is recorded in the minutes of a meeting of the Brassington Council. I would like to also add that everyone I've spoken to in village, which is a lot of people, is against this, and they are scared that they will not be able to sit in their gardens during the day, evening or weekends without the constant bang, 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 bang of shotguns, and how this will impact on the enjoyment of their gardens and their mental health. A typical response from one of the many I've had from people who live there is, we currently experience plenty of gunshots noise at the weekend. As a long-term resident of the village, this has increased significantly over the recent past. Any proposals to establish a business operating in excess of 200 days a year must surely constitute a further dramatic increase in the impact on the village. Whilst we recognise that 2 individual assessments have been carried out, we welcome the opportunity for someone to sit in our garden and be party to hear firsthand the impact this has caused. I think you only have to see the number of complaints from the people who live in the local villages that the noise from the shooting is very real, and an increase will cause harm to all those who live in the local villages. I would also say that I see minimal benefit to the local villages in this business.
30 seconds left.
That's all I have to say.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. Just to advise that members did visit the site yesterday to taken on the site and shown how the site was laid out. Members also looked at the access track, given concerns over highway safety that have been raised. Members were also taken down into Brassington to listen to shots that were fired off by the applicant. The conditions were that there was a southwesterly wind at the time, which you could not hear Holborn Minerals site, and you couldn't hear any gunshots. I personally have visited the site with the environmental health officer on a day when there was shooting on the Sunday, and visited Brassington. The wind was in a direction towards Brassington that day, I could hear gunshots, and we both could listen and hear gunshots. I could hear the the industrial building also with a constant hum in the background, and then went to the villages of Hopton and Carsington, where at that time there was no audible shots. So it seems like weather conditions can provide some movement of noise around the area. Nevertheless, we've requested that a professional survey be undertaken by the applicants. That has been submitted, and that has been submitted to our environmental health section. They've considered that, but they have they've advised that they don't deem the nuisance to be sufficient, that it would stand up to a recommendation of refusal. I'll take questions. Thank you.
Members, questions? Councillor Archer.
And just coming back to a couple of the points made by a couple of the speakers about it's not just necessarily the level of noise, but also the nature of the noise. And one of the speakers referred to a Supreme Court judgment. I just wondered if officers were aware of that and could consider whether or not, even if the decibel level isn't judged as nuisance, would it be possible that it could be found that the nature of the noise and the setting of a peaceful rural environment could be classed as unreasonable noise?
Lee, I don't know whether you want to add anything to the...
I don't know if Chris wants to jump in on anything from a planning perspective. From a noise nuisance perspective, Environmental Protection Act, there is no, it's generally an assessment from the environmental health officers of whether it's a nuisance. The additional part that comes into play with this, it's been that this is a business, they would have a statutory defence called best practical means, which means that if they've done everything they can to limit the noise or use their best practical means to do so, then it still wouldn't be a statutory nuisance. And I think that's one of the issues of which the environmental health officers would have been looking at when they visited the site.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Gareth, do you want to add anything to that?
I've lost my line of thought. If it comes back to me, sorry.
Okay, not a problem.
It's really responding to the point.
Okay. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, one of my questions is regarding when was the assessment done, and what I would like to know the decibels involved, actually, if that's possible, Gareth. That's my first question. There's decibels that are acceptable.
Well, basically, in paragraph 210, they have in the paragraphs 2.7 to 2.10, they've set out a series of recordings that were taken, and also with their comments about what the decibel levels were. All that information has been submitted to the environmental health, excuse me, the environmental health section in the form of those noise reports, and they have assessed that submission, and based on those findings and based on having been out on site, they have advised that they can't see it as being of sufficient nuisance to warrant refusal.
May I come back, Chair?
Yep.
My second question is, Gareth, we were on site yesterday and talked to the applicant. I want clarification this 9 till 9 business, because it's not what we were told yesterday, I believe.
No, when the application came in, there were the hours of operation suggested 9 o'clock till dusk. well, dusk could be any time, and therefore we wanted to clarify that that we wanted to put firmer conditions on the shooting, so that it for certain events it was only between 10 and 5, which aren't controlled on the Sundays. At the moment, you see, the main element of the business is that they shoot every other Sunday, which is where they have competitions, and that is where they have their main amount of people attending, and it can be 100 or so. They can shoot on that day within the 28 days that they're permitted to shoot. So basically, without permission, the applicants can shoot every other Sunday. That works because it ties in with the fact that on the opposite side of the road, the Darley Dale Shooting Club shoot every other Sunday. Now, what the applicants are looking to do is to keep that as it is, but also to introduce other shooting activities whereby, again, there are a series of hours set out under the table in 2.6 of the report. And so basically you'll see that competitions are between 10 and 5, shooting experiences where there's 1 to 6 people, 10 till 5, game days, 10 till 5, practice and sports trap between 10 and 5, and one-to-one lessons no earlier than 10 o'clock and no later than 8 o'clock. So that's how they should be operating within those restrictions as a condition of the planning permission. So if they were shooting earlier or later and we had reports, they could be essentially in breach of those planning conditions.
Thank you for that clarification. And my final question, Chair, is we also talked yesterday at the applicant regarding the 215 days operation. If that, and they seem to be quite happy with that, yeah? But if there's any more than that, we can surely condition that, can't we?
Again, there is a condition whereby we've said that they should not go beyond what they've suggested in terms of their layout of when and how often they will be doing each of the particular events. Now, there's also a table in there that sets out that you will see that the number of days in which activities may occur is less so, obviously, in the winter months than going through the summer months, where it would be they would wish to shoot more, obviously due to the conditions. But again, it would be with the competitions. It would be likely to be. It would still be every other Sunday, and the others. Again, it would be down to how well the applicants market their business and how much business they actually get in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a couple of questions. On the 84 people who have expressed support for the application, can you tell me how many of those live locally, please? On the hours and days of operation, when I look at your proposals for hours limitation and the schedule of activities, approximate schedule of activities submitted by the applicant, I see that you agree it's quite likely that shooting will occur or can occur on 4 days in any week, and that that shooting will be continuous, at least between the hours of 9:30 5, occasionally between 9:30 and 7. Can you give me an idea as to whether it's reasonable to think that residents would be hearing gunshots continually during those hours? Have you made an assessment? You use the word intermittent on page 54 in paragraph 7.8. I'm not quite sure on what evidence you base that, but do you think it's quite possible that on many of those 4 out of 7 days, residents will hear gunshots throughout the day?
Currently, when the competitions are on a Sunday, I expect that the noise would be throughout the day because there's 100 people essentially there, and maybe the majority of those shooting at various points. It's a competition. So the applicants can do that currently without planning permission if they keep that to 28 days in a year. What we have to therefore look at is, well, what are the other events that they're doing and how intensive are they, over what periods of time, and the applicant, as it's set out in the report, has set out what those events amount to, how many days they expect those events to take place in the year, and also what the nature of those particular events is. So if there was if there was one-to-one lessons, you will get very intermittent firing. Over an hour, you'll get approximately 25 shots because there will be instruction. So over that hour period, there will be that level of noise. If the applicant was to host 8 such hours in a day, there would be shooting throughout the day. However, it's unlikely there will be that level of one-to-one lessons occurring, and the applicant suggests that there might be 75 days where that takes place, but in those days I wouldn't necessarily expect there to be constant shooting throughout the day. And we've set the times that allows some people who may want to go for lessons after work to be able to go up till 8 o'clock at night. Now, again, that is one instructor with a learner, and therefore the level of activity is lower than you would expect in an hour's shoot in a competition.
Okay. So just to be clear, there'll be 29 days of competition, so that's one more than potentially is allowed presently. So there'll be 29 days of, as you say, continual shooting throughout the day, with 100 people shooting at once throughout the day. And the shooting experiences, the simulated game days, the practices and the one-to-one lessons will all be additional, which we're not really clear how, what level of frequency throughout the day that shooting will occur.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the biggest event is basically the competitions which occur as permitted development. The applicant has said 27 days in the year, which is, I mean, there's 52 weeks in the year, so half that time is roughly about 26. So 27, so every other weekend, which is what they currently do without planning permission, the need for planning permission, that is what occurs. And then after that, you'll see that they've set out series of other events that they would hope to take place for the benefits of the business, and they set out how many people that would involve, how many shots each, how many days, and the sort of periods. Now, they're not going to be shooting continuously. For example, the clay shooting experiences, there's likely that people will come along as a group. They'll need an instructor, so they will be shooting 25 shots each. That might take up to 6 hours. It could take 3 if there were 2 instructors. But the idea is it's a day, so they will probably break for lunch, and so that will, it will be basically an intermittent shooting over the day. That's also reflected upon by the environmental health section, who recognise that the shooting will be intermittent for a lot of the time. But again, we've had their assessment.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Burfield.
Thank you, Chair. We've had a late representation from Ible Parish Council, which seems to imply that they weren't consulting. In fact, throughout all the report, there doesn't seem to be any mention of the noise impact on Ible, and they obviously think that was a serious omission. So, were they consulted? That's my question, and if not, why not? That's the first question.
No, Ible Parish Council weren't consulted. When we undertake our consultations on applications, we will consult with the parish council within which the site is set. In this case, there was an adjacent parish council, that being Carsington and Hopton, so we consulted Carsington and Hopton. We didn't consult other parish councils, because it's a case of how far do you throw the net, basically. They've obviously picked up and they've raised comments about the application, and they also reflect on the concerns raised by Carsington and Hopton and local residents.
So, presumably then no readings were done in Ible, as in Hogneston, Carsington and Brassington. There weren't any done in Ible? No.
There were none done in Ible, Elton, Aldwalk, Hogneston, there's none in Wirksworth, none in, I don't think Middleton was done.
And this is a bit of a difficult one, really. It might be for our legal advisor, but could he make any comment on what was said by the last speaker about Brassington and the views of Brassington and the vote there?
Yes, through you, Chair. Can you just remind me, Councillor, of what the comments were?
I can advise. The concern that was raised was that the comments from the parish council from Brassington were to not raise any objections, but the concerns were that members of the parish council, some members of the parish council, had vested interests in the application.
Thank you, Gareth. Through you, Chair, that's a matter of a complaint and raised through the Code of Conduct. If nothing's come forward and no representation is made, we have to deal with what we have. If there was concerns, then Code of Conduct should have been raised, and that would have been formally investigated by the monitoring officer.
Okay, Councillor Burfield. Councillor Buttle.
Oh, thank you, Jason. Gareth, do we actually know whether or not the amount of shots fired per hour has any relationship to the amount of disturbance that's caused? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that the odd shot is going to be more distressing than something just going bang, bang, bang.
Well, again, the information that has been submitted about how the activities occur has been considered and looked at. There may well be differences in how you might appreciate it. If you've got 100 people, if you've got a competition and there are, say, 7 traps shooting at the same time, you will get a regular number of shots. That was quite apparent when I went to Brassington and heard the shooting on that day. Whether that is more or less harmful than someone shooting 25 times in an hour, it's beyond my to say whether what the psychological differences are.
Yeah, I get that. The reason I'm asking is because it seems that constant, solid days of shooting aren't really doing people's heads in. You know, like they're managing. 27 days a year, it's not causing a deal of aggravation. But being faced with 200, an extra 150 days a year does seem to be causing some consternation. So I'm wondering if maybe the thing to do would be to try and compress the hours that this work is being done to 5 hours a day rather than 10, so people can be at work or be at home. They can shut the windows from 9 till 2:30 and that's it. They don't have to live with it. It's out of their life. And then they can live the rest of their life more sensibly. Is there a way we can bring the hours down to a level which both suits the local people and suits their business people? Has this been approached?
Well, no, basically we have an application in front of us for a certain amount of shooting because the applicants are seeking to make a full-time business that would support them out of this. And what we've tried to establish is what amount of that they're seeking. We have to consider the application as submitted. I think if members were minded to defer it to start asking for a consultation to be undertaken between officers, local residents and the applicants to seek to agree a specific time of that things actually occur. I think it might be too restrictive on the business potentially. It may be something that doesn't get agreement. What members have to do is assess whether or not they feel that what's in front of them is acceptable. That is the nature of the application.
Right, before we move on to the next question from Councillor Archer, I'll move an extension to the meeting. I'll move an hour because we've got 5 more items. I therefore move. All those in favour, please shout. So let's try and get it done in an hour. Right, the next on my list for a question is Councillor Archer.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully pretty quick. Just was there any thought of doing a sound test on the trail? And would we be justified in that? Because this is very close to the trail. I'm thinking of horses, dogs, and obviously people as well. But maybe animals getting spooked and things. Was there any thought of doing one on the trail? Do you think it would be justified to do a test of the noise levels on the trail, which is very, very close to the shoot, as far as I can work out?
Well, there is clearly a lot of noise generated by the gunfire. I went actually onto the site when the guns were being shot in competition. So it is a noisy activity. and being on the site, I don't think that the level would drop necessarily significantly to being on the High Peak Trail. But the High Peak Trail it's enjoyed by tourists, it's enjoyed by cyclists. They will hear this activity as they approach the site. As to how much it affects their appreciation of the environment, say sometimes people might stop and look and see what's going on, what's all this about. It's a judgmental thing. Does it significantly harm the amenity to the extent that that would be seen to detract from that by providing what is essentially partly a tourist activity in the shooting? Would it detract from the tourist value of the High Peak Trail? So that's a judgment. Now, in terms of horses, again, yes, you will hear shots. There is one lady who locally uses it who has raised concern that she currently can speak to the applicant about when the shooting's likely to be, and he has stopped the shoot when they've been going past. Whether that's so achievable with the increased number of days, you know, it is something to consider. But again, to get to the point whereby the shooting is occurring, you would be probably trekking some distance, and that noise would be evident on the approach. So whether that would spook horses as they get closer or further away, that I can't say.
Okay, Councillor Archer. Right, in which case I'll move into debate. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, it's been quite a long debate and quite an interesting visit to the site yesterday, and I think I'm glad we went to appreciate the beautiful area it is, and you know, it's nice to bring people and tourism into the area and of course to the economy. So for that reason, I'm very happy to move for the officer recommendation for approval.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Lees.
Yeah, Chair, again, I was on the site visit yesterday and quite happy to second this. Quite, even though, like you say, noise does travel around these valleys, but it's quite a remote place where it is, so I'm happy to second this for approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lees. Anybody else wishing to speak in debate? Councillor Archer.
I don't think I can agree. I think I'll have to go against recommendation here. I think I've got too many concerns. I think over 200 days is too much. I think the nature of the noise, the nature of the environment, it's a peaceful rural location. Whether the sound tests officially reveal that a level that officially is nuisance is one thing, but it's very clear from the people who live in this area that it is a nuisance to them. And they've accepted it on the current level, and there's been a good level of understanding with the business. Nothing against the business, it's clearly a very good, well-run business, but I think the impact on these local residents, if it's expanded to the extent that this is proposed, is going to be too much. And I also have real concerns, coming back to the question I asked about its proximity to the trail. It's a very prominent part of our tourist offer, that trail. Loads of people use it, bridle path riders, dog walkers. And although I take the point about you'll approach it from a distance, we've also heard tonight this is only going to be intermittent. So it is quite possible that a horse is coming along the trail and all of a sudden there's a very large bang. The equestrian business, or the lady who mentioned in the comments here, talks about having to arrange times when she can go through when there aren't gunshots. She clearly feels that's a risk. So I do think there's some very, very serious concerns about the impact of increasing the level of activity on this site. And again, nothing against the business. I would normally want to support business in the area, and it's clearly a good business, but I think the impact on residents and tourists on the trail is too much for us to approve this proposal.
Councillor Mrs. Burfield.
I absolutely agree with Councillor Hedger. I think this is a really difficult one in that, you know, we all want to see local businesses thrive, but I do think 215 days is just too much. I'm not totally persuaded by the fact that we went to Brassington, and I don't know how many shots were fired. I'm not persuaded by the fact that just on that one particular day, with those particular wind conditions, whatever, that the fact that we didn't hear it, you know, that doesn't totally persuade me. I think because it's clear from residents and what they've said that they do hear it and they are disturbed by it. And for me, personally, intermittent loud noises are the worst sort of noises, actually, because you don't really know when the next one's coming. But I think at the same time, this is why I'm finding it difficult, because we've got to balance the interests of people who want to go and do this shooting against the interests of the people who are going there for, you know, relaxation, whatever it may be, walkers, climbers, cyclists, and particularly horse riders. So on balance, I'm not happy with 215 days. So I think an increase in the days is probably acceptable, and I don't really know where to sort of move on that one, but I can't vote for 215 days.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Burfoot. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Well, to avoid the impasse that we arrived at on the previous application, I'm in fact going to move a deferral of this application.
There is already one.
Well, sorry, an amendment. I'm going to move an amendment, sorry, that the application is deferred. A reason for doing that is I agree with my previous two colleagues that the order of magnitude of increase from a maximum of 28 days to a maximum of 215 days is an enormous scale. It's over 9 times. It's over 9 times increased activity. I happen to live somewhere where within about 2.5 miles of a clay pigeon shooting range, which is intermittent. But when it is operating, yes, you do hear a continual noise of the shots. Now, I agree they're not a noise nuisance in the statutory definition, but they certainly affect amenity. And I can assure you that if the residents of my ward had four occasions a month, when between 9:30 and 5 o'clock they had the continual bang, 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 even the peaceful residents of my ward would be down here sitting on the steps outside the town hall. So I think I would move a deferral, because I think we need to re-examine both the total number of days, 215 days, and the activity timetable that the applicant has proposed. For example, we're being asked to agree to 4 whole days in June, and presumably Sundays, that's every Sunday in June, because the applicant says that the competition shooting takes place on a Sunday. So every Sunday, every June, there's between 9:30 and 5, there's going to be bang, 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 bang all day. Every minute of every hour, and I think that is just not appropriate in our location. That's not to say that we aren't supporting the applicant in their business venture. I just think we need to have a more reasoned discussion with the parishes concerned, given that we want to encourage business growth, but we need to do it in a way which respects the amenities of our local residents. And I think that's a negotiation which can take place, as I said, both the type of activity. I mean, to me, a corporate shooting event that's not going to be a peaceable occasion. Corporate events are not peaceable, and again, 6 days in June of corporate events. I have to think that is inappropriate. On top of 4 days of competition. So you've got 10 days of an unholy noise throughout the day. So I think that there's very reasonable to ask our officers to go to reflect the concerns expressed by certainly a good proportion of members of this committee to renegotiate the total number of days and renegotiate the types of competition and the event timetable. So I would move a deferment on that basis, Chair.
Right, thank you very much.
An amendment.
Well, an amendment is adding or deleting words, and the recommendation and what was put forward is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. So I don't know how you can do that, so I'm not going to allow that.
Well, I'm trying to avoid the impasse that we arrived at, last time, Chair.
Well, there is a motion on the table. I'm not allowing the amendment. Like I say, it's either adding or deleting words. And the recommendation that came off the floor was that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. So you're not adding or taking anything away. So I'm not going to allow it. The next on my list is Neil Buttle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Now, I wasn't going to go with Peter's method of trying to have a negotiation with parish councils and the shooting people. I was hoping that we could possibly set some conditions for 4 days a week of shooting, so that Ibble Parish Council say they want fixed times and residents can be guaranteed not to hear. And that strikes me as being absolutely fair. I think that if you're living locally, you should know when it's going to be quiet. And this information is quite generic, the tabling here of how much noise is going to be. Now, we're in debate. I'm not quite sure how we move forward from here, but I would very much like to find some way where we can bring things together. It just seems sensible, like this is our job. We're Democrats. We're here to sort of represent the people to the people that are doing things and making it work.
Councillor Butler, I'll just come back on that point and some of the points made by the previous speakers. I'm conscious that some members that put motions on the table or amendments didn't visit the site yesterday. And it was clearly explained by the applicant that in order for this enterprise to be a viable proposition to them, they need this number of events, and it's how they've operated over recent months. And in that respect, I think, whilst I appreciate what you're saying, I think we have to assess the application as submitted. The applicant's clearly presented that number of events in order for this business to be viable to them, and I think in that respect we should consider the application as submitted.
Absolutely, I understand. I shall consider it as it stands.
Okay. Tom, do you want to come back as the proposer?
Yes, basically what Chris has just said. On the site visit yesterday, we did speak to the applicant on that, and what they indicated was that basically it wasn't worth their while running a business unless they were allowed to shoot 215 days a year. But what they also said that not necessarily be 250, it could be much less, depends on demand. So I think we're going to trying to reduce all these numbers. They're not quite all add up really. So I was quite happy with the 215 days that they indicated, and I think they were quite genuine in what they said. So I will still be supporting it.
Okay, thank you very much. Nobody else down for debate. It's been moved and seconded that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. All those in favour, please show. All those against? 4. Any abstentions? So the motion's been carried. It's been granted. Thank you very much. Right, the next on my list is item 5.4, which is application number 21/00575 full. It's Darley Cycle Road Racing Club, Darley Airfield, Darley Ashbourne. Retention of noise attenuation bunds. I don't know whether there's any late representation on this. There. mean, there is some late reps, so I'll let you read that, but Chris just wants to come back on something before we move on.
Yeah, the late representation for this particular item is just a correction on the report. We've incorrectly identified the application to fall within the parish of Yeavely. Actually, it said Edliston and Wyreston, so we've just corrected that in the late representation sheet.
Okay. It's pretty short anyway, the late representation, so I presume everybody's read them by now. So I have 3 speakers on this. The first is Mr. Jim Malkin, the agent to speak in favour of the application. You have 5 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, members, and I promise not to mention swimming pools, hot tubs or shotguns at any point.
Thank God for that.
It's clear from your officer's report that the key issue here is the balance between the impact of the bund on the character and appearance of the landscape and countryside and its benefits in terms of noise reduction. Whilst it is accepted the bund does have an impact upon its surroundings, it is our view that this is somewhat overstated in the committee report. The bund adjoins an existing one which has planning permission and is viewed in the context of several similar lawful structures at the circuit. It is not therefore considered that the bund appears alien or out of keeping with its surroundings. It's important to recognise that the bund is not finished yet. If approved, it's the applicant's intention to seed it with wildflower and to plant trees similar to those that would have been planted elsewhere around the circuit. This will help the bund to assimilate into the landscape and ensure that it does not appear unduly prominent. It is noted in the landscape officer's comments that he considers the bund is not prominent from roads or built-up areas. It is also clear from the fact that they recommend several conditions that they do not consider that the bund has a sufficiently detrimental impact upon the landscape to warrant refusal. With regards to noise, the Environmental Health Officer concludes that insufficient information has been submitted to demonstrate betterment and recommends that a robust assessment is carried out by a qualified professional be submitted. The applicant agrees and is prepared to commission an assessment as recommended. This type of assessment was completed to support the previous application for the clay shooting range upon the request of the Environmental Health Team, and we've not been given the opportunity to provide such an assessment at this stage. It's our view that a robust assessment will demonstrate that the bund results in noise attenuation benefits that will outweigh its limited visual impact. We therefore respectfully request that members defer the application to allow a thorough noise assessment to be completed by a specialist consultant. Thank you for your time.
Very succinct, thank you very much. The next on my list is Mr. Jonathan Edwards, Wyreston Edliston Noise Abatement Group, to speak against the application. Similarly, you have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when it's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jonathan Edwards from Wyreston. I am the officer for the Wyreston Edliston Noise Abatement Group, which is a group formed to monitor the noise from Darley Moor. I haven't got any new information. I've given 3 letters and some photographs to the planning office regarding it. What I want to say is the application is for retention of a noise attenuation bund when it is not a noise attenuation bund, since it does not prevent the noise transmission to any properties. The reason why it doesn't do this is it has to be between the noise source and the receptor to have any value of whatever. This is included in the acoustic consultant's report that the Darley Moor had done at the time of the planning permission. It was done by Dr. Fillery, a very well-known noise consultant with regard to racetracks, and he said quite clearly a barrier to be effective that has to interrupt the direct sound path will provide useful attenuation if it interrupts the direct sound path, and it obviously does not. Since the application, we've looked at the noise assessment done by Darley Moor. It has no value at all. I've done a further assessment, and I'm qualified to do that. Since the application, I've done measurements on both sides of the barrier, and I've got those data for you if you want to ask me any questions. So my request to you tonight is to refuse the application because it simply isn't a noise attenuation barrier.
Thank you very much. Right, the next on my list is Councillor Matthew Taylor, Edliston and Wyreston Parish Council. You have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. The PC has been consulted in regard to this retrospective planning application, and careful and considered opinion is that the proposal does not serve the purpose for which it was intended and upon which this application is based. We consider the construction to be detrimental to the landscape due to its height, position and design. Consequently, the area and its enjoyment of the footpaths by both locals and visiting walkers is negatively impacted. Our further concern is that the planning application is not able to clearly demonstrate that the outcome of this construction will reduce noise and improve the lives of the residents of the neighbouring parish, and it is therefore not fit for purpose. What we have considered to come to this conclusion is the proposal of benefit to the parish or of a detriment? Will it enhance or negatively impact the landscape and or the environment in which it sits? Is the proposed construction fit for purpose as defined within the detail of the planning application? And are we satisfied that it has had the full scrutiny of the regulatory bodies covering both planning and environmental control? And we do understand that environmental control here have given their opinion. A proposed development of this type, industrial in scale, involving hundreds of thousands of tonnes of material and 2 years of construction, using heavy plant machinery within an environmentally and aesthetically sensitive setting, demands and expects careful scrutiny, and we have been diligent in that process. It should be noted, and this is important, that Edliston and Wyre Parish Council have not received any complaints in relation to noise emanating from Pennine Autograss track that neighbours Darnley-Moor Motorcycle Racing Club. And any suggestion that these bunds have been placed where they are to mitigate noise from Pennine Autograss is not relevant to this application. Pennine Autograss, its ownership and operation, is entirely separate as a legal entity to Darnley-Moor Motorcycle Racing Club. Therefore, in conclusion, the residents of the parish and also the parish council
30 seconds left.
Would welcome any reduction in noise, and we would support any application to that effect. But these noise attenuation bunds have been demonstrated empirically that they do not mitigate noise and as intended and are therefore not fit for purpose, do not add value to the landscape in which they sit or to the parish or the visitors to that parish. And we therefore recommend that the committee refuse this application.
Absolutely spot on.
Thank
you very much. So, anyway, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points to come back on there. And I think it's worth just setting out the background to this application. So, planning permission was sought retrospectively for the bund on this particular site. And in support of the retrospective application that was received, the applicant advised us that the bund had been formed to provide a more effective mitigation of noise caused by motorcycles accelerating out of the hairpin. Now, members will have noted yesterday the position of this bund relative to the racetrack and the comments of the Environmental Health Officer. The only perceived benefit of this bund is from activity on adjacent land in association with the Pennine Autograss event. As the previous speaker has mentioned, that isn't a source of nuisance. The source of nuisance or the source of complaint is from the motorcycle racing activity on the circuit. Officers have considered this proposal in detail, and I think what members need to have regard to is the Environmental Health Officer's findings, bullet point number 5, where basically they're saying the siting of the bund has no actual noise attenuation capabilities due to its location in relation to the noisy activities from riders leaving the hairpin bend. It serves no useful purpose in terms of noise attenuation from the activity on that racing circuit. So in that respect, the development constitutes, in officers' opinion, an unwarranted and unjustifiable form of development in the countryside. Just addressing the agent's comments on the landscape impact, I think you have to consider the Trees and Landscape Officer's comments in the round. What they're saying is that the bund in itself is a significant man-made linear structure within a relatively open and flat landscape. So in that respect, it is an incongruous alien feature in landscape terms, and without justification, it's just a totally unacceptable form of development in officers' view. I'm happy to take questions.
Members' questions. Councillor Burford. I like it when you go first, Sue.
I would like to speak later, but the question is really, have investigations been done as to what's been used to construct this bund, and are there concerns as put forward by the Parish Council in their report about its stability? When we were on site yesterday, we did seem to see evidence of some of the construction that seemed to be collapsing.
Yes, this is something that officers have considered, and it is covered in the officers' report. I think it's section. Paragraph 7.15. So there was allegations that material was being brought onto site in association with the construction of the bund. We have sought clarification from the applicant as to where that material's come from. You'll note from the officer's report that the suggestion that the material is from the site itself. We don't have any evidence to the effect that substantial amounts of material has been brought onto the site, but clearly if members were minded to refuse this application, and if we're satisfied that the development serves no purpose, then we may have to consider whether the works amount to waste development as opposed to engineering works requiring planning permission from the district council. If it's the former, then we may have to ask the county council to intervene in terms of regularising the development that's taken place under the powers that they have. If it's district matter, then it's something that the district council will have to pursue through enforcement powers in seeking the removal of the bund from the site.
Okay, so Councillor O'Brien.
I think you've mostly answered the questions I was going to ask there. As you say, you're saying this is an unauthorised deposition, so it's a retrospective application. First question is, will the applicant therefore be required to remove the material once it came? How long will they have to achieve that? And I have to say, my specific question is, in your view, does the deposition of this material constitute disposal of waste?
It's a difficult question to answer without real evidence of where that material's come from. If it was transported to the site and it is, for example, construction waste or material, then I think you could argue, well, that's waste transfer process and waste development as opposed to engineering works, which is something that we consider as a district council. So it's something we'll need to consider. We'll need to discuss that with the county council in terms of appropriateness of taking action and who should take that action. I think if members were minded to refuse this application, the next steps would be for the district council to have those conversations with the county council and then begin formal enforcement proceedings. And we'll have to specify an enforcement notice, the steps to comply with that notice, and we'd have to set a time period within the notice. And the appellant or the applicant would have a right of appeal in respect of the decision we make this evening, but also a right of appeal in respect of any enforcement notice that we serve.
Okay. Councillor Paul.
Right, thank you. Well, obviously reading this report, there's lots of issues, obviously environmental, going over footpaths and the likes, but as the actual speaker, the agent, made a comment, if we deferred it, they're prepared to have the sound barrier noise done. There is a problem with noise up there. There has been for numerous years with this going on. They are obviously trying to alleviate the noise in some way, but obviously they're not going about it in the right direction. So if it was deferred, is there a possibility that they could take this back, get the right equipment to use to actually make a bung for the sound all around it, or is this something that wouldn't be passed full stop in general?
Referring back to the environmental health comments and the comments of the last two speakers, officers are of the opinion that the siting of the bund has no actual noise attenuation capabilities. So in terms of its position relative to the nearest noise receptors, it's not effective as a noise bund. So we feel that it's just an inappropriate form of development, not something we can resolve through further noise assessment.
So sorry, it isn't something that can be deferred to go back and revisit. It's something that has to be refused and start all over again then.
There's fundamental concerns with the siting of the bund relative to the nearest noise receptor, so a further noise assessment wouldn't serve a useful purpose in that respect.
No, I was on about actually getting somebody there to direct them to what they should be put in there, but okay,
yeah.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fitzherbert.
I think I know the answer from the length of the paper and our officer's time. It says determined date 23rd of June 2021. That's 11 months. I assume my question is why.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzherbert. Well, the application was submitted or presented to us as a noise attenuation bund. We had very little information submitted with the application to demonstrate its effectiveness as such. So we asked the applicant to present us with information, initially to satisfy us that the development was a district council matter as opposed to a county council matter, given the allegations of waste material being brought onto site. The information was eventually received, but it was very limited in terms of the content. It was basically noise readings either side of the bund, and that for us didn't demonstrate that the bund was effective in terms of mitigating noise from the motorcycle racing on the site. The only justification in noise terms was it provided some betterment, albeit very crudely, to the activity that was taking place on adjacent land in the Pennine Autograss racing events, which isn't a source of nuisance.
Okay. Right, I'm going to move into debate. Councillor Bull. I mean barefoot, bloody hell. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
No,
It begins with B, you're all right.
Well, you both SB, so I'll just look at it. I'll just take a bit, yeah.
Well, here we have a retrospective application, which always somewhat angers me. But I think the officers have got it absolutely right on this one. It's clearly not a noise attenuation bund. It's a man-made landform, and you know, if I can quote from the report, which I absolutely agree with, that it's a encroaching and unwarranted form of development. It's harmful to the character appearance of the area, and it's not what it's claimed to be. So for those reasons, I'm happy to recommend refusal along with officer's recommendation. So for refusal.
Thank you very much. Does that find a second? Councillor Paul? I won't call you Burfield.
Yes, ditto, as in what I said. I do think the officers have got it right, and if you're going to put something there to get rid of the noise, then it's got to be something of worth and not infilling land or getting rid of something that we don't want to be worried about what we're getting rid of. Many thanks.
Councillor Archer, do you want to speak in debate? Or quite happy. If there's nobody else to speak in debate, then I'll move to the vote. It's been moved and seconded that the application be refused. All those in favour, please show. It's a unanimous decision, so that's been refused. Thank you very much, members. Richard, as far as I'm concerned, we've got to get through all the agendas, so it's entirely up to the members of the committee. Right, anyway, moving on. Application 5. Item number 5.5 is application number 21/0128 full. change use and conversion of barns into 3 dwellings with associated parking, landscape and formation of new vehicular access at the barns at Edniston Park, Painters Lane, Edniston. Now, I believe this is an application that's lapsed in time, so it's just coming back so they can get their approval, so they can move on and doing it. So, are you dealing with this one, Chris? Yeah. Okay then, Chris. Over to you, because there's no registered speakers.
Just to echo the Chair's comments there, this application is different, but a similar proposal was approved in 2014 for conversion of these buildings to 3 new dwelling houses. The proposal that's before members has been presented to the Planning Committee because the development involves 3 or more dwellings outside of the main market towns and Darley-Dale. So our scheme of delegation requires that the items considered at Planning Committee. There is very little in terms of public interest. There is a lapsed planning permission relating to a very similar development, which allowed some modest extensions to the buildings, and this application follows those same parameters, and it's acceptable in development plan policy terms, so we're recommending approval of the application.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I mean, I'll just point out, members, there is a bit of a late correspondence, but it's more to do with conditions. So it's more to do with all gutters, downspouts and external plumbing shall be in black finish. That's condition 7, and condition 8 requires windows and door dealing to be submitted prior to the installation, and they should be timbered to match the existing windows and doors. So anyway, members, I've read that out for you, so we'll go into questions. Councillor O'Brien.
Just a detailed question on the officer's response, condition 7. Is this a misprint? The applicants requested, has said that they intend to use cast iron effect to be painted black, whereas we're giving them permission to use plastic, any sort of plastic. Should we not here be saying external plumbing should be in cast iron or cast iron effect painted black? As it stands, we're simply giving them permission to use any material.
Yes, sorry, I'm just looking at condition 7 in the report.
The applicant said they want to use the black cast iron effect.
Yeah, I think black cast iron effect is a more traditional appearance.
I'm happy with that, but we're saying just should be a black finish, which could be, anything.
It could. I think if members were, I think it is a more traditional treatment for the black cast iron effect. It'd still be obviously a plastic product, but it's more in keeping, isn't it, with traditional.
Yeah. No, I'm happy with that, but I'm not happy with just saying black finish, because that can be, I won't name products, but that could be just plastic.
I think if the applicants pull that forward, I think we should take them up on that offer, as you point out, Councillor.
Why don't we just say black cast iron effect?
I think that's a valid point, and a condition that could be, or an amendment to that condition that could be carried.
Any more questions, members? No? Then I'll go into debate. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, like Chris, I was there in 2014, was it, Chris? 8 years ago? Yeah. And yes, I would quite happily support this, because those buildings have been standing, they should have been renovated a long time ago. So it's a shame that they're standing there and not being in use. I'd love to see them back in the use. So I'm very happy to move the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much. I'd like to second that. I was there in 2014, and I'm glad it's going to get done now. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in debate? Councillor O'Brien.
Can I just put forward that amendment then to condition 7, that it should read, shall be in black cast iron or black cast iron effect plastic finish?
I will ask the proposer and seconder if they're happy with that. Councillor Donnelly. No. Councillor Fitzherbert. No. Sorry, Councillor O'Brien. So it's been moved and seconded for approval.
Well, I'd like to put forward that amendment, Chair, then.
Well, you need somebody to second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll second it. In which case, then, we'll go to the vote on the amendment first.
Could the officers just confirm they'd be happy with that amendment?
I think given that the applicants offered that up, that would be a more traditional treatment to the buildings. I think that's an acceptable amendment to officers.
So anyway, we'll vote on the amendment first. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against? 6, so the amendment's failed. Anyway, we'll go back to the substantive motion. So it's been moved and seconded that planning permission granted to conditions. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous, and that's been passed. Thank you very much. Where have we got to go to now? Done that one. Done that one. So the next item for determination is application 22/0015 full, Old House Farm, Canally, Roston, Ashbourne, retention of agricultural building, stable, menage and horse walker as built and constructed. So I don't think there's any representations on this. And we have no registered speakers. So are you doing this one, Chris? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This item is before members because it constitutes major development and because the size of the application, site area and or the size of the buildings. Planning permission has been previously granted for a similar development. There was some deviations from the approved development that are set out in the officer's report. However, as officers, we're satisfied that the impact on the local environment is acceptable, hence why we're recommending approval of the application. You'll note there's little in the way of public interest, again, in this application. Happy to take questions.
Questions, members? No? In which case, then we'll go straight into debate. Councillor Fitzherbert?
I think we went there before, Councillor Donnelly and I, several years ago, and I'd like to move the recommendation for approval.
Second?
Second that, Chair, yeah.
Anybody else wishing to speak in debate? No? All those in favour, please show. All those against, so I think that's been carried unanimously, so that's been approved. Thank you very much, members. Right, moving swiftly on, item 5.9, application number 22/0219, full. Formation of vernacular access and parking at 42 Smedley Street East, Matlock, Derbyshire. I believe we have the applicant here, Mr. Andrew Turner. You have 5 minutes to speak, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Chair, can I just ask, we've got 3 microphones on already. Could we turn those off before? Thank you.
You'll have to turn your microphone back on. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking the Planning Committee for taking the time yesterday to visit number 42 and hopefully getting a better appreciation of the site and traffic flow on Smedley Street East that looking at plans and photos alone cannot convey. I only wish the Highways Department had taken the same approach, as I really believe a meeting on site at number 42, as I requested in my pre-planning application email, would have been able to resolve most, if not all, that is being discussed tonight before I submitted my planning application. I was told on the 9th of December 2021 by the Highways Department that I would need to apply for a drop curb covering the road frontage of number 42 for off-street parking to be considered. So I submitted the plans you are now looking at based on this requirement. This was despite my own major reservations over this requirement, as there is already a full drop curb pull-in adjoining number 42 frontage, which I believe is not only the safest but most practical way to access and exit the proposed hard standing. Added to this, the area is currently frequently used for vehicle movements, pulling off from and rejoining Smedley Street East, for example by the post van multiple times a day, food deliveries, general package deliveries and also the general public, all of which has been taking place for many years without impacting highway flow or causing safety issues to other road users on Smedley Street. The highway's objections are based on distance calculations for a vehicle exiting or entering the proposed hard standing at almost the most westerly point of the frontage, when in fact using the existing pull-in and drop curb area to the east of the frontage drastically increases the westerly visibility to circa 40 metres. My proposal to satisfy the highway's concerns is to now leave the majority of the existing wall frontage of number 42 in place and dispense with an additional drop curb and just open up the east side of the frontage for entering and exiting the proposed hard standing. By doing this, it ensures vehicle movements are restricted to the safe zone of the frontage. I am happy keeping the wall frontage to number 42 being a condition to the approval of the hard standing. This way it safeguards things for the future. I don't know if this is something that can be considered tonight's meeting or if the application can be deferred pending further highway investigations. But I'm more than happy to make myself available to help facilitate this as required. I really believe this application can be approved to work in a safe and practical manner without contravening highway regulations or setting a precedent to other possible future applications due to the very specific location of number 42 having the adjoining pull-in already in place to be utilised for this purpose. At the same time, this would give me the opportunity to have off-street parking without impacting current on-street parking provision and allow me to also install an off-street electric charging point. I want this access to be safe, not only for myself, my family and other road users, and request it is given the chance to be approved. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. So, who's doing this one? Are you doing it, Chris? Oh, there is a little bit of late rep, so I don't know whether you want to quickly look at that first. Sorry, members. Members happy? A lot of you are smiling, so you must be. Anyway, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Members will note from the officer's report that the main reason for refusal here is the impact of this development on highway safety, and in particular the visibility that's achieved from the new parking area that's to be formed on the back of this development. The late representations relate to comments received from our Design and Conservation Officer, and they reaffirm really what's already in the report in terms of the impact of the development on the conservation area. It's not considered to be harmful to the conservation area, so the reason, the sole issue or the main reason for refusal that members need to consider is the impact of this development on highway safety. Members visited the site yesterday, and they will have noted the existing situation where you've got a boundary wall serving the adjacent property, and you've got existing buildings that sit within the available visibility sight lines in a westerly direction. What was also clear on site is there was an existing crossover which served a historic access to a use that's no longer in operation, and the applicant made it clear that he wanted to explore whether that could be extended slightly to provide him with a slightly better amount of visibility onto the highway. I can't confirm whether or not that would satisfy the local highway authority. They've clearly expressed a view that even based on very low vehicle speeds, it's unlikely that the development is likely to achieve a satisfactory level of visibility. But that's something that members may wish to consider, and whether they would seek deferment of the application for that to be fully explored, and also to give the applicant the opportunity to present information on speed of traffic in that locality in terms of what requisite visibility display would be necessary on the back of a development at this site of this nature. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, yesterday when we visited the site and talked to the applicant, actually what he was telling us, and his intentions is not quite what was in the application. And I think it was a bit unjust for us tonight to have to recuse this. I think that the best outcome would be for it to defer the application, so that we look at the approach onto where the parking is, onto the road, and it's slightly a different angle altogether, really. So I'm happy to propose that we defer the application for further information.
Councillor Burfoot. Right, so,
Now, Chair.
yeah, you can speak
I
now.
haven't got a question now.
Okay.
So my reason for going for a deferral on this one are based on really what Chris has said to us. If we look at the report, the only reason for a recommendation of refusal is on highway grounds. But when we went to the site visit yesterday, what we found, and I'd seen this before actually, but what members did find was that there is an existing vehicle access just next to the site that's been there for some time. It used to be an access up to Peyton and Baldwin's Mill, and now it's got a bollard, so you know vehicles can't get up there. What the applicant is asking for is for this area to the right of that diagram there, that plan, to be extended, and it might then give us the visibility that's required by highways. Because at the end of the day, this is a really busy, it wasn't particularly busy yesterday, but normally people are fighting for car parking on Smedley Street, and to get a car off the road, and especially for it to be an electric vehicle, is a win-win really for everybody. I'm really sad that the applicant had a bad experience with highways. You know, that really does disappoint me. I'm not absolutely convinced that they will have been out to the site, and I think that's where we should be asking our officers to engage with them, shall we say, to explore the option that's been put forward. But I hope, you know, that they will. It won't be a desktop exercise. They go and have a look, because you need to go and, you know, you needed to have seen it. I have to put my little plea in at the end that if it was a 20-mile-an-hour zone in residential area, it might, you know, things would be better still.
I think that's something maybe the county councillor might be able to take up.
I have to take that up.
So, anybody else wishing to ask a question? No? In which case, moved in debate. It's been moved and seconded. Anybody wanted to speak in debate? Councillor O'Brien?
Yeah, I support the move for deferral, but I do have an issue with the potential design of the parking area. I mean, as we read, and as when I went out to see it, it is in the conservation area, and there's a particular characteristic to this set of properties that with the flagged approach to the front door, the separation of the pedestrian access to the front door and the remainder of the frontage area, and I have to say I don't think that digging the whole lot up and replacing with chippings or hard standing or what have you is an appropriate solution there. I think there is a better solution which provides for off-street parking, but also reflects the very interesting characteristics of this particular terrace, which, as I said, has an approach to its front door separated from the remainder of the frontage. And I do think that when the officers look at the detailed design, they will ensure that is reflected in what is given approval to.
Okay, thank you very much. Nobody else wanted to speak in debate? been moved and seconded for deferral as outlined by Councillor Burfoot and Councillor Donny. So all those in favour of deferral, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? That's been carried for deferral. So thank you very much. Okay, and last but not least is application 5.10, application number 22/00335 full. Now, there is a bit of late rep, a couple of lines, so I'll let you read that, and then we'll go. Just before we do that, though, I will move another extension of half an hour. I therefore move. Second. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. So, anyway, the first on my list to speak is Mr. Ian Mannering, applicant. You have 5 minutes. I didn't know whether it was Mannering like the TV show or Mainwaring, so I just went with the television. Sorry about that. I hope it was right. Oh, okay. Okay, Captain. Right, you have 5 minutes, and I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Good evening. I'd first like to address a couple of points in the plans report. All the previous highways issues were resolved during the previous application. The building has been described as a simple outbuilding. The person who had it built it with cavity wall insulation, its own central heating, running water and a toilet. I wouldn't say it was exactly simple. In truth, it's far less simple than my actual house, which requires a lot of renovation to reduce its carbon footprint and make it more habitable for my family. One of the reasons for being recommended refusal is development in the countryside, which is policy S4. The building is already there. The planning application does not change the size or height of the building. The only change would be introduction of windows and doors. It is being stated that it is in an unsustainable location. However, there are 4 new large properties that are currently being built just behind the building's location. The building has also been described as being of incongruous form. I personally don't understand how this can be, as the building is already there and already looks pretty much like a bungalow, so its looks are only ever going to improve. I have a young family and I would love to be able to renovate my home for them. So I do intend to sell the property with the plan to release the funds so that I can do so. I intend to increase its energy efficiency, both with improved insulation and a ground source heat pump, also upgrading its windows and doors, all of which come at quite a hefty cost, which currently I cannot afford to do. If given planning permission, the property would be perfect for either a retired couple or a young family, with having a good-sized garden and fantastic views. It will be a more affordable property than the 4 houses being built. It also has a south-facing roof, which will be ideal for solar energy, and has space for renewable energy heating solutions such as ground or air source heat pumps. The renewable energy could also be used for charging electric vehicles, making it very economical and have a low carbon footprint. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Please take the points I've made into consideration when making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very succinct. The last to speak on this is Councillor Jackie, and as the ward member to speak in favour of the application. You have 5 minutes, as soon, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be really quick if I can, because I'm sure everyone wants to go. If you were able to attend the site visits yesterday, you would have seen the extensive development that is currently underway in this small hamlet on the A515. Further development is proposed with the demolition of the old Hallmark tractor building, replacing it with a new purpose-built industrial unit, and this has been positively received in the area. The conversion of the garage to a dwelling at Springfield House is a really good opportunity to provide more housing in an area which is expanding. The 4 detached properties along Oak Lane are nearing completion. The redevelopment of this existing building will not increase the footprint of the current structure. There will only be the addition of ground floor glazing and roof lights for the first floor rooms that will be created. The original highway issues with access to the new house have been addressed and resolved. Derbyshire County Council Highways no longer have any objection to this development. The officer's report states that the building will be incongruous in its setting. I do find it difficult to see how an existing building, which will have very little external alterations, that is not being increased in size, is constructed in the same materials as Springfield House, will not fit in with the current surroundings or properties. This could be an argument for a new build, but I believe it's not relevant in this situation. Ian and his family intend to sell the garage with planning permission, if granted, so they can use the funds to renovate their home, including improving its energy efficiency. This is something that so many of us are doing at the moment to combat the significant rises in the costs of powering and heating our homes. I believe that the local plan policy HC8 supports the conversion of the garage, in that it states permitting conversions for residential use that makes a positive contribution without extensive alteration, rebuilding or extension. Further, policy PD1 requires a development to be of high quality, which respects the character and identity of the Derbyshire Dales. This garage is constructed in the same materials as the main dwelling and therefore fits in with the surrounding properties. I hope you will support approving this conversion, which will provide an additional home in an expanding area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you taking this one, Joe? Okay, Joe. Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. So this is another one that members visited yesterday. Appreciate the comments that the speakers have both made there. I think the main issue with this application, not necessarily the alterations that are proposed. I know that it talks about incongruous. I think that's more the principle of converting this building. I think policy S4, if I can find it, should have prepared this ready, for development in the countryside, it says that any proposals for the conversion of reuse of buildings should be a building that positively contributes to its surroundings. I think in this case we've just got what is a simple garage building. So I think the principle of converting this building in an unsustainable location outside of a settlement boundary is the issue. I should note as well, I know that they mentioned about the history, the previous speaker mentioned about the history. I believe the amended plan, which addressed the highway concerns, was received formally by the council after the date the decision had been issued, so that's why the reasons for refusal were included. I appreciate they have been addressed, so they no longer form a reason for refusal of this application. And I guess it's also worth mentioning that the council is obviously aware of its inability to demonstrate 5-year housing land supply, but they don't consider the conversion of this one garage, which will form one dwelling, to outweigh the harm generated by a dwelling being formed in an unsustainable location. I think it's my understanding as well, the 4 houses referred to that are currently under construction were recommended for refusal by officers and allowed at committee. So I think I'm happy to take questions on the application.
Right, members, open to your questions. Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, on that last point, given that the council have previously approved dwellings, notwithstanding policy S4, I'm intrigued to understand why you still consider this application to contravene S4 when council has agreed that 4 dwellings within 100 metres don't.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably more appropriate that I respond to that question, because I was the case officer for the Hallmark Tractors development, which involved a residential component. That was a larger scheme, and it was recognised by members in making the decision that the delivery of a small amount of housing in that location would actually deliver the project in terms of all the economic benefits that it would bring in terms of the relocation of the depot building and associated employments. That was weighed in the balance when members made the decision. Here we're dealing with a proposal for a dwelling house. Policies in our plan seek to protect the countryside and only allow for appropriate forms of residential development. But there is recognition that in countryside locations there are buildings that contribute positively to the local landscape. So where you've got redundant farm buildings, for example, of historic and architectural interest, they're worthy of conversion and reuse. Here we're dealing with a garage within an existing dwelling house, the curtilage of an existing dwelling house. We don't feel that it contributes positively in that respect to satisfy policy HC8 of the local plan and the requirements of S4, hence why there's a recommendation of refusal with this particular application.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Buckingham?
Yeah, I was one of the people that voted against the Hallmark Tractors application on the grounds of sustainability. And the rest of the council, rest of the committee went against me. And now I feel that I owe the applicant the natural justice of following the line that was taken by the entire committee on the neighbouring property. So I'm going to go with this. I think that we've gone one way. We should stick with our view. If we're going to start saying, well, the sustainability doesn't apply to that side of the fence, then it doesn't apply to this side of the fence either. So I'm absolutely happy with this one, and I will vote against officer appraisal, even though I kind of went the other way last time, just because it's just not fair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bunt. I don't think there was a question, that was more of a comment. Councillor Mrs. Burford?
I haven't really got a question, to be
Well,
honest now,
well, in which case,
so.
if you want to...
What I would say as a question, I suppose, is do the officers not agree with me that this actually looks like a bungalow at the moment? It's got a garden, it's got a front door, it looks like what it's going to be if we approve it.
Well, I mean, let's face it, Sue, you went in and had a look, but you didn't know the heating was on, but anyway. So anyway, if there's no more questions, I'll move into debate. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, it's lovely to have an applicant that's so honest tonight, unlike some of our other ones. And I really think we should support him and his family. And it was great to go around there. And the reasons for overturning officer recommendation are thus: that it would not result in an incongruous form of residential development. Rather, it would be a perfectly acceptable development on balance, whether it's in the open countryside or not. And after the site visit, I hope very much other colleagues will vote for this development and for this honest applicant.
So I take you've moved it for approval then, Richard? Yeah. Councillor... Oh, okay. Well, okay then. Do you want to speak, Sue? No, okay. Councillor Donnelly? Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, it's been done somehow. Councillor O'Brien?
I was just going to say I support 110% the proposer and seconder.
Right, in which case, and I've got nobody else down to debate, so we'll go to the vote. So it's been moved and seconded for approval against officers' recommendations. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So it's been carried, so congratulations. Anyway, just a little bit of housekeeping now, just to note the appeals progress report, so I'll move it. All those in favour, please show. Chris, do you want to make any comment on it?
I think I should just very quickly just update members that we have also received an appeal decision in respect of 8 to 10 Snitterton Road, which is an allocated site in our local plan, the former RBS bank premises, and that appeal was dismissed. You'll note the application for a bungalow at Edgefold Road and an award of costs against the authority. The authority is a little bit disappointed with the quality of that decision and have raised concerns with the planning inspectorate. I think in terms of overall appeal performance this year, 25 appeals have been dismissed and only 8 allowed. So I think it demonstrates good performance over the year and implies that quality of decision making is relatively high at Derbyshire Dales District Council. But there is a couple of appeal decisions there that have been allowed by the inspectorate.
Councillor Burfoot, is there any sort of comment you want to
Well,
make?
no, it's just about the Edgefold Road one, and I know that you wrote an excellent email to the I can't remember who you wrote it to, but anyway, have you had a response?
I'm in a list, and I said, well, they've had an automated email to say the earliest I can expect a response in 40 days. So I don't anticipate a response probably until before the next planning committee meeting.
What would be the most that you would expect to achieve, not to pay the costs?
I think what we could do, if there's any admission or any, if the inspectorate accepts any error, then I think we can seek redress through the form of compensation from them, and I think the expectation would be that they would cover the costs, any cost claim that was made to the council. We'll have to see what they come back with. They might defend their position. It may, as an authority, we may have erred in our judgment, and we'll need to reflect on that.
Anyway, thank you, members. That is the end of the May planning meeting. Hope to see you all in June. Thank you very much. Good night.